They say an alpha king rules with strength, but what happens when the strongest man in the kingdom becomes the weakest fool? When the woman destined by the moon itself to stand beside him is cast out like garbage while a serpent slithers into his bed? This is the story of how pride destroyed a kingdom and how the Omega they abandoned became the only thing standing between survival and total collapse. If you want to see how power crumbles when built on lies, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know my pack is listening. The throne room of Silverfang Palace stank of old blood and older mistakes. Darius Thorne sat on carved blackstone that had held the weight of Alpha Kings for 200 years, but tonight the seat felt wrong beneath him. His shoulders carried muscle that could snap necks and his jaw was cut from the same brutal stone as the mountains surrounding his territory, yet something hollow had taken root in his chest where certainty used to live. The torches threw shadows across walls decorated with the pelts of enemies and the weapons of defeated rivals. But none of those victories meant a damn thing anymore. Seraphina stood at the far end of the hall. She did not kneel. She did not lower her eyes. The Omega Luna, who had once looked at him like he hung the moon, now watched him with something worse than hatred. Disappointment. That quiet, bone-deep disappointment that made his wolf pace and snarl inside his skull because instinct screamed that he had failed the one creature he was born to protect. You could see it in the way she held herself. Spine straight, chin level, hands folded in front of her pale blue gown that probably cost less than the wine Evelyn drank at breakfast. Seraphina's dark hair was pulled back simple and clean, no crown, no jewelry, nothing but the mate mark on her neck that he had put there 3 years ago, when the bond snapped into place and the world made sense for exactly one perfect moment. That mark looked faded now, dull, like even the moon goddess was ashamed of what he had let happen. Evelyn stood beside the throne, one hand resting on the armrest like she owned it. She was all red silk in calculated curves, gold dripping from her wrists and throat, lips painted dark as murder. Her scent rolled through the hall thick and cloying, nothing like the clean frost and pine smell that used to calm him when Seraphina was near. But Evelyn had a way of filling a room, of making men forget what mattered and focus only on what they wanted. And Darius, God's help him, had wanted. The gathered pack members shifted and muttered, wolves in human skin who could smell weakness the way sharks smell blood. Elders stood near the columns with arms crossed and faces carved from disapproval. Warriors lined the walls, hands near weapons, eyes tracking everything. This was not a casual assembly. This was a reckoning waiting to happen. Darius cleared his throat, and the hall went silent. "I did not call you here to waste time," he said. His voice came out rougher than intended, scraped raw from too many nights drinking alone in his chambers while his wolf howled for something he refused to name. "We have matters of security to address, reports of rogue activity near the eastern border, missing supply shipments, unrest among the lower packs." Seraphina's expression did not change, but something flickered in her gray eyes. Knowledge. She knew exactly why supplies were missing and who was behind the unrest. She had tried to tell him weeks ago, and he had shut her down in front of the entire council, called her paranoid and emotional, told her to leave strategy to those who understood warfare. The memory tasted like ash. Elder Matthias stepped forward, his white beard bristling. "With respect, Alpha King, the unrest began after Lady Evelyn took her position as your companion. Packs who have served Silverfang for generations are questioning the stability of leadership when the fated Luna is pushed aside for—" "Enough!" Darius snapped. The word cracked like a whip. His wolf surged, pressing against his skin, forcing dominance into the air until weaker wolves lowered their eyes. "You forget yourself, old man. I decide what serves this kingdom. Not you, not the council. Me." Evelyn's hand slid along his shoulder, nails scraping lightly through his shirt. She leaned close, breath warm against his ear. "They fear change, my king. They cling to tradition because they lack your vision. Show them strength." Her words wrapped around his mind like silk over a blade. Seraphina finally moved. She took 3 steps forward and every head turned. When she spoke, her voice carried clear and cold as winter rivers. "If strength means watching your people starve while gold disappears from the treasury, then perhaps we need a new definition. If vision means ignoring reports of warriors vanishing near the northern pass, then perhaps someone else should open their eyes." The hall erupted. Wolves shouted over each other, some defending their Luna, others calling her disrespectful, a few demanding answers about missing warriors. Darius felt control slipping through his fingers like water, and the sensation made his wolf snap with rage because an alpha king did not lose control of his own damn hall. "Silence!" he roared, and the command hit like a physical blow. Wolves stumbled. Weaker pack members dropped to their knees. Even the elders flinched. Only Seraphina remained standing, steady as stone. "You will not disrespect this throne," Darius said, each word deliberate and cold. "You are Luna in name only because I have not yet severed the bond. But keep pushing, and I will cut you loose entirely, let you crawl back to whatever minor pack spawned you." Something broke in her eyes. Not tears. Seraphina did not cry anymore, something deeper. The last fragile thread of hope snapping clean. She bowed her head, not in submission, but in finality. "As you command, Alpha King." Then she turned and walked out, back straight, steps measured, leaving nothing but silence and the ghost of frost and pine that made his chest ache. Evelyn's smile was small and satisfied. "Well done, my love. The pack needs to see decisiveness." Darius said nothing. He stared at the doors Seraphina had disappeared through and wondered why victory felt so much like loss. Later that night, Darius found himself in the war room staring at maps he could not focus on. The room smelled of leather and old parchment, walls lined with strategies from campaigns his father and grandfather had waged. Silverfang had been built on strength, on alphas who led from the front and crushed anyone stupid enough to challenge their borders. That legacy sat heavy on his shoulders, a weight he had carried since his father's death 5 years ago, when the pack looked to him and he swore he would be stronger, harder, better. No weakness, no mercy, no room for softness in a world that ate the gentle alive. Then Seraphina had appeared at a treaty negotiation with the Riverside Pack, a minor Omega from a minor bloodline who should have been invisible. But when their eyes met across that table, something ancient and absolute clicked into place. The mate bond was not gentle. It was a wildfire that consumed everything else, a certainty that carved itself into his bones and made his wolf sing for the first time since childhood. He had claimed her that night under the full moon with the goddess as witness, brought her home to Silverfang, made her his Luna and his queen, and swore before every pack in the territory that she was his forever. 3 years. 3 years of waking up to frost and pine and quiet laughter. 3 years of her hand in his, her voice in his ear, her presence smoothing the jagged edges of kingship. She never asked for power or wealth, never demanded anything, just stood beside him and somehow made ruling feel less like drowning. Then Evelyn arrived, daughter of a wealthy Eastern pack, educated and cunning, offering trade agreements and political alliances that would strengthen Silverfang's position. She spoke his language, understood strategy, did not flinch when talk turned to blood and battle. Where Seraphina was soft words and gentle touches, Evelyn was sharp edges and ambitious fire. And somewhere in the late-night strategy sessions and shared victories, Darius had let himself forget what mattered. Evelyn said Seraphina was weak, said an Omega Luna made the kingdom look soft to their enemies, said a true Alpha needed a mate who could rule beside him with strength, not compassion. She whispered poison so sweetly he drank it down and called it wine. Now half his council would not meet his eyes, and warriors muttered in the training yards and supplies vanished while his queen, his fated mate, wandered the palace like a ghost. The door opened without a knock. Evelyn glided in wearing something dark and expensive, a bottle of imported whiskey in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. "You are brooding," she said, setting the glasses down and pouring generous measures. "It does not suit you." Darius took the offered glass and drank. The whiskey burned clean. The elders are restless. The elders are old and frightened of change. Evelyn settled into the chair across from him, crossing her legs with deliberate grace. They cling to Seraphina because she represents the old ways, soft leadership, emotional decisions. They do not understand that the world has become too dangerous for gentle queens. "She protected our southern border during the winter campaign," Darius said, surprising himself. "Organized supply lines when I was in the field. Half the warriors who survived that season say her planning saved them." Evelyn's smile was patient. "And you rewarded her efforts by keeping her as Luna. But gratitude is not the same as respect, my king. The pack follows strength. Right now they see a king divided between duty and sentiment. I am not divided. Then prove it. Evelyn leaned forward, green eyes sharp. The Blood Moon Assembly is in 3 weeks. Every pack in the territory will be watching. Show them you have moved beyond the past. Make your choice clear. Darius drained his glass and poured another. And what would you have me do? Cast her out entirely? Exile my fated mate like she means nothing? If that is what leadership requires, then yes. Evelyn's voice was steel wrapped in silk. You are Alpha King. Your strength is the kingdom's strength. Weakness anywhere is weakness everywhere. She rose, trailing fingers across his shoulders as she passed. Think on it, my love. The pack needs to see their king unshakable. Then she was gone, leaving only expensive perfume and doubt. Darius sat alone in the war room, staring at maps, his wolf pacing restless circuits in his mind. Somewhere in the palace, Serafina was probably awake too, staring at her own ceiling in whatever cold chamber she had been moved to when he stopped coming to their shared bed. His hand moved to the mate mark on his own neck. It ached. A constant low throb that never quite faded, like a wound that refused to heal because he kept tearing it open. Strength, he told himself. The kingdom needs strength. But his wolf only howled. Quote, 3 days before the Blood Moon Assembly, a young warrior named Kieran staggered into the palace courtyard at dawn, half dead and covered in blood that was not his own. Darius was in the training yard working through sword forms, trying to exhaust the restless energy that had been building for weeks. Sweat soaked through his shirt, despite the morning chill, and his muscles screamed, but the movement kept his mind focused on something other than gray eyes and disappointed silences. The shout went up from the gate guards. Kieran collapsed before he made it to the steps. Warriors rushed forward, catching him before his head cracked stone. Blood soaked through makeshift bandages wrapped around his torso and one leg bent wrong. His breathing came shallow and rapid, eyes unfocused. Darius dropped his blade and ran. What happened? He demanded, kneeling beside the fallen warrior. Where's your unit? Kieran's hand shot out, gripping Darius's arm with desperate strength. Ambush, he gasped. Northern Pass, 20 of us went in. I am the only one who got out. The words hit like a fist to the gut. 20 warriors, an entire scouting unit. Gone. Who? Darius said. His voice came out too quiet, too controlled, wolf pressing against his skin, ready to tear the world apart. Who did this? Did not see them clearly. Kieran coughed, and blood flecked his lips. But their leader, she had red hair, wore Silverfang colors, knew our patrol routes, knew exactly where we would be. Ice flooded Darius's veins. Red hair, Silverfang colors, someone from inside the palace. Get him to the healers, he snapped at the surrounding warriors. Now. And send riders to the Northern Pass. I want that ambush site secured and every body accounted for. As they carried Kieran away, Darius stood in the courtyard, his hands shaking not with fear, but with volcanic rage barely contained. 20 warriors dead because someone betrayed their positions, someone inside his own walls. Serafina appeared at the edge of the courtyard. She looked like she had not slept, dark circles under her eyes, still wearing a simple dress that hung loose on a frame that had grown too thin. But she was there, watching, and when their eyes met, he saw no surprise in her face, only grim confirmation. You knew, he said. She moved closer, steps careful like approaching a dangerous animal. I suspected. 3 weeks ago, supplies meant for the northern outpost were diverted. 2 weeks ago, patrol schedules started leaking to border raiders. I tried to tell you. The memory slammed into him. Her standing in the council chamber, papers in hand, voice steady as she laid out evidence of internal sabotage. And he had dismissed her, called her paranoid, told her to stop inventing conspiracies to regain his attention. Who? He demanded. I do not have proof yet. But the pattern started when Evelyn arrived, Darius finished. The words tasted like poison. Serafina held his gaze. I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to investigate before more of your warriors die. She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist. The touch of her skin against his was like lightning, the mate bond flaring bright and painful after weeks of cold distance. She flinched, but did not pull away. Why? He asked, and hated how broken the words sounded. Why would you still care after everything I have done? Her gray eyes were ancient with grief. Because someone has to. Because those warriors did not deserve to die for your pride. and because you may have forgotten what it means to be king, but I have not forgotten what it means to be Luna." Then she pulled free and walked away, leaving him standing in blood-stained courtyard dirt with his world cracking open beneath his feet. Boy, That afternoon, Darius locked himself in the royal archives and started digging. Records of supply shipments, treasury logs, patrol schedules, marriage registrations and trade agreements, and correspondence from every pack in the territory. The archives were a maze of parchment and bound volumes that smelled like dust and secrets, maintained by Elder Cormac, who looked surprised to see the Alpha King dirty his hands with paperwork. "What exactly are you searching for, my king?" the old archivist asked. "The truth," Darius said, and then hated how naive it sounded. But Cormac just nodded slowly. "Then you will need these as well." He pulled out several locked volumes from a hidden cabinet. Personal financial records, the ones we keep separate for security. Who has access to these? Only the Alpha King, the head treasurer, and whoever the king specifically authorizes. Cormac's watery eyes were knowing. Lady Eveline requested access 2 months ago. You signed the authorization yourself. Of course he had. She had needed it for the trade agreements or the border negotiations, or one of a dozen legitimate reasons that made perfect sense when she was standing close with her hand on his arm and her voice in his ear. Darius cracked open the first volume. Numbers swam across the page. Gold coming in from taxes and trade. Gold going out for supplies, wages, infrastructure. It should have balanced clean, but the columns were wrong. Small amounts missing here and there, never enough to raise immediate flags, but adding up to staggering sums over months. He cross-referenced supply shipments. Grain meant for the northern packs diverted and sold to eastern merchants at profit. Weapons intended for border outposts rerouted to private buyers. Medical supplies meant for the healer's wing vanishing entirely. And every single discrepancy had been authorized by documents bearing the royal seal. His seal. His signature. Except he did not remember signing half of them. Darius spread the documents across the table and started comparing the handwriting. His own signature was rough and impatient, letters crammed together because he hated paperwork and always rushed through it. These signatures were smoother, more careful, nearly perfect copies, but not quite. Someone had been forging his authorization. He grabbed another volume. Marriage contracts and bloodline records. Silverfang kept meticulous track of who mated who, which alliances were formed, which bloodlines carried what strengths. It was vital information for maintaining pack stability. There. Evelyn's family history. The documents she had provided when she first arrived. Daughter of Alpha Marcus Wild of the Eastern Ridge Pack, educated in territorial politics, unmarried, and available for alliance consideration. But tucked behind those official papers was another document, older. A marriage contract from 7 years ago between one Evelyn Wild and Alpha Nathaniel Cross of the Shadowpine Rebels. Rebels. The word sent ice through his veins. Shadowpine had tried to break away from Silverfang territory 5 years ago, claiming the Alpha King overreached his authority and demanded too much tribute. Darius's father had crushed them personally, scattering the survivors and executing the leadership, including, if memory served, an Alpha named Nathaniel Cross. Evelyn was the widow of a rebel leader, and she had been living in his palace, sleeping in his bed, whispering poison in his ear for months. Darius stood so fast the chair crashed backward. He grabbed the documents and ran. Tukuk. He found Seraphina in the lower palace gardens where she had been spending her days. Not the grand formal gardens where nobles walked and admired imported roses. The working gardens where vegetables grew for the palace kitchens and healing herbs were cultivated by the medical staff. She was on her knees in the dirt, hair tied back with a scrap of cloth, hands deep in soil as she transplanted seedlings. Aluna working in the dirt like a common servant. The thought would have horrified him months ago. Now it just made his chest tight because she had always been like this, finding ways to help, to serve, to build instead of destroy. He stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. I owe you an apology. Seraphina did not look up. She pressed soil around another seedling with careful fingers. Just one? I owe you 1,000 apologies. He moved closer. You were right. About the sabotage. About the betrayal. About everything. She finally raised her head. Dirt smudged her cheek and her gray eyes were tired. What did you find? He handed her the documents. She read through them slowly, expression darkening with each page. When she finished, she set them aside and went back to her planting. So Lady Evelyn is not what she claimed to be. And you finally believe me. What happens now? Now I confront her. Darius knelt beside her in the dirt, not caring that mud soaked into his pants. I arrest her for treason. I find out who she is working with and how deep the conspiracy runs. And then? Then I fix this. His hands clenched into fists. I fix everything I broke. Seraphina's laugh was bitter and small. You cannot fix a shattered bond with apologies, Darius. You cannot take back months of humiliation and cruelty and expect everything to go back to the way it was. I know, he said quietly. His wolf whimpered, clawing at his insides. But I can try. You can rule your kingdom, Seraphina interrupted. She finally looked at him directly and her gaze was winter cold. You can protect your people. You can be the king they need, but you cannot have me back just because you finally realized I was telling the truth. The words cut deeper than any blade. Seraphina, please. No. She stood, brushing dirt from her dress. You made your choice. You chose pride over partnership. You chose a beautiful lie over an inconvenient truth. Now you have to live with that. She gathered her gardening tools and walked away, leaving him kneeling in the dirt with documents proving his own blindness and a mate bond that ached like an open wound. Eek. The Blood Moon Assembly began at sunset. Every pack in Silverfang territory sent representatives. Alphas and elders and warriors filled the great hall until the space nearly burst with bodies and barely contained aggression. The Blood Moon came once a year, a time when grievances could be aired and challenges issued and alliances formed or broken under the goddess's red eye. Darius stood before them all in formal armor, the crown of Silverfang heavy on his head. Evelyn stood beside him in crimson silk that matched the moon rising outside, looking every inch a queen. She had been furious when he told her they needed to talk after the assembly, sensing somehow that the ground had shifted beneath her. But she smiled for the crowd and played her part. Seraphina stood with the other court members near the back. She wore pale blue again, simple and unadorned, but every eye in the hall found her eventually. The forgotten Luna, the cast-aside mate, the Omega who still carried the king's mark on her neck even though he had taken another woman to his bed. Elder Matthias called the assembly to order. Grievances were aired, border disputes settled, trade agreements negotiated. Warriors challenged each other for rank and fought in the combat circle while the crowd roared. Blood was spilled, but honor was satisfied. This was pack law, brutal and honest and clean. Then Alpha Marcus Wild of the Eastern Ridge Pack stood to speak. Marcus was gray-bearded and thick with muscle gone soft, the kind of alpha who had ruled through intimidation and tradition. His eyes found Evelyn, and something passed between them too quick to catch. Alpha King Darius, Marcus said, voice carrying. I come before this assembly with concerns about the stability of Silverfang leadership. The hall went silent. Darius felt his wolf surge. You question my strength? I question your judgment. Marcus gestured to Evelyn. You set aside your fated mate for my dear niece. An understandable choice given Luna Seraphina's limitations. But the bond between an alpha and his true mate is sacred. To break it without formal severance shows either weakness or cruelty. Niece. The word landed like a stone. Evelyn's hand tightened on the throne arm, but her smile never wavered. Your niece, Darius said slowly, feeling pieces click into place. You never mentioned family connections to the Eastern Ridge Pack. A minor oversight, Evelyn said smoothly. Uncle Marcus and I have been estranged for years. I did not think it relevant. Liar, a voice called from the crowd. Kieran stepped forward. The young warrior had refused to stay in the healing wing, insisting he needed to attend the assembly. Bandages still wrapped his torso, but he stood straight, fury burning in his eyes. Lady Evelyn is no estranged niece, Kieran said. She is Marcus Wild's spy. I saw her at the ambush site. I saw her giving orders to the wolves who killed my unit. Outrageous, Evelyn snapped. The boy is delirious from his injuries. I saw you, Kieran roared. Red hair, Silverfang colors. You knew exactly where we would be because you planned the whole damn thing. The hall erupted. Wolves shouted accusations and denials. Warriors reached for weapons. Marcus Wilde's face twisted with rage and calculation, trying to control a situation spinning wildly out of his grasp. Darius stood slowly. The movement was deliberate, and every eye turned to him. "Is this true?" he asked Eveline. His voice was deadly quiet. "Of course not," she said, but her scent had changed, the cloying sweetness now edged with bitter fear. Darius looked to Elder Cormac. "Bring the documents." The old archivist came forward with the financial records and marriage contracts. Darius took them and held them high. "These records show systematic theft from the royal treasury, forged authorizations bearing my seal, supply diversions that weakened our border defenses." He turned to Marcus. "And a marriage contract proving that Eveline Wilde was widow to Nathaniel Cross of Shadowpine, a rebel alpha executed for treason against this crown." The crowd turned ugly. Eveline's mask finally cracked. She took a step back, looking between Darius and Marcus, calculating escape routes. "You self-righteous fool," she hissed. "You were so easy to manipulate, so desperate to believe you were strong that you abandoned the one person who actually gave a damn about you." Marcus moved toward the door, but warriors blocked his path. "We came to weaken you from within," Eveline continued, voice rising, "to destabilize Silverfang so the Eastern Pax could finally break free of your tyranny. And it almost worked. It would have worked if you had just been a little more stupid, a little longer." Seraphina stepped forward from the back of the hall. The crowd parted for her like water. She moved with quiet grace until she stood before the throne, and this time when she looked at Darius there was no disappointment, only cold determination. "You wanted proof," she said. "Here is your proof." She pulled documents from inside her dress. Lists of missing warriors, records of secret meetings between Marcus Wilde and rival alphas, correspondence detailing plans to fracture Silverfang territory and divide it among Eastern Pax. She looked at Eveline. "I have been gathering evidence for months. Every lie you told, every treaty you undermined, every loyal wolf you had killed, all of it documented." "How?" Eveline breathed. "Because someone had to actually protect this kingdom," Seraphina said simply. "And you made one critical mistake. You assumed an Omega Luna was too weak to matter. You forgot that we are the ones who hold families together, who keep communities alive, who see everything because no one thinks to hide from us." She turned to address the assembly. Lady Eveline and Marcus Wilde conspired to destroy Silverfang from within. They planned to assassinate key supporters of the crown during this very assembly and use the chaos to install Marcus as new Alpha King. Her voice rang clear. "They used our king's pride against him, made him doubt his mate, made him weak when he thought he was being strong. And they nearly succeeded." The hall fell silent. Darius felt the weight of every eye on him, felt the judgment of his people, felt the crushing reality of how close he had come to destroying everything his bloodline had built. He looked at Seraphina and saw the future he had almost thrown away. Then he looked at Eveline and saw only an enemy. "The sentence for treason is death," he said. But his wolf demanded worse. "You will be stripped of your name and your status. You will be marked as traitor and outcast, and you will be exiled beyond the northern borders to die slowly in the wilderness that does not forgive weakness." Eveline lunged for him, claws extending, a last desperate attack. Seraphina moved faster. The Omega Luna, who everyone dismissed as weak and soft, met Eveline mid-leap and drove her to the ground with shocking force. They hit stone hard, and Seraphina's hand closed around Eveline's throat, pressing her down with a strength that made warriors step back in surprise. "You lose," Seraphina said quietly. Then she stood and let the guards drag Eveline away. Marcus Wilde was seized along with 3 other Eastern Alphas who had been part of the conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The judgment was swift. By the time the blood moon reached its apex, traitors had been stripped of their status and dragged beyond the borders to face whatever death found them first. The assembly dissolved into chaos and celebration. Wolves who had doubted their king now cheered his decisive action. Warriors who had mourned their lost brothers now had justice. The conspiracy was broken, and Silverfang stood strong. But Darius barely heard any of it. He stood alone near the throne, watching Seraphina speak quietly with the elders, organizing relief efforts for families who had lost warriors in the betrayal. She moved with calm efficiency, the same way she had always moved, fixing problems and healing wounds while everyone else focused on glory. She had saved him, saved the kingdom, saved everything he had been too blind and stupid to protect himself. And he had absolutely no idea how to tell her that his wolf was dying inside, howling for its mate, begging for one more chance that he knew he did not deserve. So, near midnight, he found her in the gardens again. The blood moon cast everything in shades of red and shadow. Seraphina sat on a stone bench near the healing herbs, her hands folded in her lap, her face turned up to the sky. She did not turn when he approached. "You saved the kingdom tonight," he said. "I saved your people," she corrected. "Your kingdom was always going to survive because the people are stronger than any king." Darius sat beside her, leaving careful distance between them. "I was wrong. About everything. Yes, I let pride poison me. Let a beautiful lie seduce me. I cast aside the one person who mattered most and nearly destroyed us all. Yes, I do not know how to fix this," he admitted. The words came out raw. "I do not know how to make you believe that I see you now, that I understand what I lost, that my wolf is tearing me apart because the mate bond knows I failed you." Seraphina finally looked at him. Her gray eyes were ancient with grief, but also something harder. Something that had been forged in months of humiliation and loneliness and quiet rage. "You cannot fix this, Darius. You can only do better." "What does that mean?" "It means you rule your kingdom. You protect your people. You become the king they deserve instead of the fool you have been." She stood. "And I will do what I have always done. I will serve Silverfang. I will help the families you forgot. I will rebuild what your pride destroyed. But not as my mate?" The question hung between them like a blade. Seraphina's hand went to the mate mark on her neck. The bond still held. Faded but present. A connection that even months of cruelty had not completely severed. "I do not know," she said finally. "Ask me again when you prove you remember what it means to be worthy." Then she walked away into the red-lit darkness, leaving him alone with the moon and his wolf, and the terrible knowledge that he might have won the battle but lost the only war that mattered. Click. The next morning, enemy war drums sounded from beyond the eastern border. Runners came sprinting into the palace courtyard as dawn broke. Border scouts reported movement, not small raiding parties. Full armies. At least 3 rival packs converging on Silverfang territory, moving fast, clearly coordinated. The conspiracy had been deeper than anyone realized. Marcus and Evelyn were pawns. Useful idiots meant to soften Silverfang from within, while true enemies gathered their strength. Now the hammer was falling and the kingdom was vulnerable, its warriors scattered, its leadership fractured, its Alpha King discredited in the eyes of his own people. Darius stood in the war room surrounded by maps and grim-faced strategists and the crushing weight of timing that could not be worse. "How many?" he asked. "Hundreds," a scout reported. "Maybe thousands. They move under the banners of Ironmaw, Bloodcrest, and Darkwater. 3 of the strongest packs outside Silverfang territory. This was the real endgame. Destabilize the kingdom. Remove key warriors through sabotage and betrayal. Then crush what remained with overwhelming force while Silverfang was still reeling. It was a brilliant strategy, and it was about to work. "We cannot hold all 3 borders," Elder Matthias said quietly. "Not with the warriors we lost and the defenses that were compromised." "Then we choose where to make our stand," Darius said. He traced lines on the map, calculating terrain and supply lines, and where they had any chance at all. "The Central Valley. We pull everyone back to the heartland. Make them come to us." "That means abandoning the outer settlements," another elder protested. "Hundreds of families live in those territories, and they will all die if we try to defend everywhere and succeed nowhere," Darius snapped. "We evacuate who we can. We burn what we cannot take. And we make the Central Valley so costly that even if they win, they will be too broken to hold it." It was brutal mathematics, the kind of calculation that kept him awake at night. But it was also the only option that gave them a chance. The door opened. Seraphina walked in without invitation. She wore travel clothes and her hair was tied back for work. Behind her came a group of Omegas and healers, all carrying supplies and determination. "You forgot something," she said. The War Council turned to stare at the Omega Luna, who had been cast aside and humiliated, who should have been cowering in her chambers while warriors planned for battle. She moved to the map and studied it with sharp eyes. "You are planning to abandon the outer settlements. Smart. But you are not planning for what comes after. Who evacuates the civilians? Who treats wounded warriors when your healers are spread thin? Who keeps supply lines organized so your army does not starve in the field? She looked directly at Darius. You need me, not as your mate, not as your Luna, but as someone who actually knows how to keep people alive when everything is falling apart. The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. Then Elder Matthias smiled slowly. The Luna speaks truth. We plan for battle, but not for survival. We need both. Darius looked at the woman he had betrayed standing confident and competent in the middle of his war council and felt something crack open in his chest. Not the mate bond, something deeper. Respect. Tell me what you need, he said. She told them. Evacuation routes that accounted for families with small children and elderly wolves. Healing stations along the retreat path. Supply caches hidden in locations that warriors could access but enemies could not find. Communication systems using Omega networks that no Alpha ever thought to track. It was detailed and thorough and absolutely brilliant. By the time she finished, the entire strategy had shifted. They were no longer just planning to fight and die with honor. They were planning to survive, to endure, to win not through individual strength, but through coordinated effort. This is good, Darius said quietly. This is very good. Seraphina's gray eyes met his. I know. Then she turned and left to begin organizing civilian evacuations, trailed by her small army of determined helpers. The War Council stared after her. Elder Matthias chuckled. That, gentleman, is what an Alpha King looks like when he remembers his queen is not a decoration, but a partner. Darius said nothing. He was too busy watching the door Seraphina had disappeared through and wondering if maybe, possibly, he might find a way to become worthy of her after all. If he survived the next week. If any of them survived. The drums beat louder beyond the borders and the war was coming and absolutely nothing would ever be the same again. The evacuation started before the sun fully cleared the mountains. Seraphina stood at the edge of the outer settlement called Riverbend, watching families load carts with whatever they could carry. Children clung to their mothers. Old wolves moved slow and stubborn, refusing to leave homes they had built with their own hands. The air smelled like fear and desperate hope, and every minute they stayed was another minute closer to the armies coming from 3 directions. Move faster, she called out. Her voice carried clear and firm. You have 1 hour before we leave, with or without you. A woman clutched her arm, eyes wide. My son is still in the fields. He went to... Then go get him now. Seraphina gripped her shoulders. Right now, not in 10 minutes. Now. The woman ran. This was the 5th settlement they had evacuated in 2 days. Seraphina barely slept, barely ate, just moved from place to place with her team of Omegas and healers, organizing the chaos that came when entire communities had to abandon everything and run. Her feet ached. Her voice was raw. Her hands were scraped from helping load heavy carts and carry children too small to walk fast enough. But she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant remembering that the mate bond still ached in her chest like a wound that would not close. How many more? Asked Mira, one of the younger Omegas who had volunteered despite having a newborn at home. 2 more settlements after this. Seraphina checked the map spread across a cart. Then we hit the Central Valley and hold the line. And if the line breaks, then we have bigger problems than evacuation routes. A commotion rose near the main road. Seraphina turned to see warriors on horseback approaching fast, led by Commander Rowan, a grizzled veteran with scars from a dozen campaigns. He pulled up short, his mount snorting and stamping. Luna, he said, and the title still felt strange after months of being ignored. We have a problem, tell me. Ironmaw forces hit the eastern border 2 hours ago. They are moving faster than we expected. If the settlement is not clear in 30 minutes, you will be caught between the retreat and the enemy advance. 30 minutes. Seraphina looked at the families still loading carts, at the elderly wolves moving at their own stubborn pace, at the children playing near the well because they did not understand what war meant. It was not enough time. She turned back to Rowan. How many warriors can you spare? None. Every sword is needed at the valley fortifications. Then leave me 5 and take the rest. We will hold the road long enough to get these people out. Rowan's expression darkened. With respect, Luna, 5 warriors cannot hold against what is coming. Then it is a good thing I am not asking them to hold. Just slow them down. She met his eyes. 30 minutes, Commander. That is all I need. The old warrior studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded sharp. You heard the Luna. Davidson, Kira, Marcus, Finn, Tessa. You stay. The rest with me. The warriors split without argument. Rowan wheeled his horse and led the main force toward the valley at full gallop, leaving only 5 fighters and 1 Omega Luna to guard an entire settlement. Mira grabbed Serafina's arm. This is insane. We should leave now. And abandon everyone too slow to keep up? Serafina pulled free. That is not who we are. She turned to address the settlement. Listen up. You have 30 minutes to finish loading and get on the road. Anyone not ready leaves everything behind and runs. Children and elderly first. Strong wolves help your neighbors. Move like your lives depend on it, because they do. People scattered into frantic action. Serafina organized them into groups, fastest in front, slowest in the middle, with the most help. Warriors spread thin to cover the retreat. It was brutal triage, deciding who got assistance and who had to manage on their own, but there was no room for sentiment when time was measured in heartbeats. 20 minutes passed. The settlement was half empty. Carts rolled down the road toward the central valley, leaving behind homes and memories and entire lives. Some wolves wept. Others moved in grim silence. A few looked back at what they were abandoning, and you could see pieces of them breaking. Serafina felt it too. The weight of responsibility. The knowledge that she was asking people to give up everything because a war they never wanted had arrived at their doorstep. But she did not stop moving. 10 minutes. Smoke rose in the distance. The enemy was burning as they advanced, destroying anything that might give Silverfang a strategic advantage later. The message was clear. This was not just conquest. This was annihilation. The last families loaded their carts. Serafina did a final sweep through empty homes, checking for anyone left behind. She found an old wolf sitting in his kitchen, arms folded, jaw set. I am not leaving, he said. She recognized him. Elder Thomas, who had served Silverfang for 60 years, who had lost his mate last winter and buried her in the garden outside. You will die here, Serafina said. I know. His rheumy eyes were calm. But I am too old to run and too tired to start over. This is my home. If they want it, they can pry it from my cold hands. Serafina felt something crack in her chest, the unfairness of it, the waste. But she also understood. Sometimes dignity mattered more than survival. She knelt beside him. Then die well, Elder. Always have, he said. She left him there and ran for the road. The last cart was pulling out. Mira waved frantically from the driver's seat. Serafina sprinted, grabbed the back rail, hauled herself up just as enemy scouts appeared at the far end of the settlement. Go! She shouted. The cart lurched forward. Behind them, 3 enemy wolves entered the abandoned homes, searching for supplies or survivors. One found Elder Thomas. There was a brief struggle, then silence. Serafina turned away and focused on the road ahead. She had bought them 30 minutes. It would have to be enough. Kit. The central valley stretched wide and defensible between 2 mountain ridges. Darius stood on the ridge overlooking the fortifications his warriors had constructed in 48 hours. Trenches and stakes and barricades made from anything they could scavenge. It was not elegant, but it was functional, designed to slow an enemy advance and create killing fields where superior numbers mattered less than position and terrain. The main force had arrived throughout the morning. Warriors exhausted from forced marches. Families from the evacuated settlements huddled in makeshift camps behind the lines, healers setting up field stations to treat the wounded that were coming. And they were coming. Darius could see the enemy forces gathering beyond the valley. 3 separate armies converging exactly as intelligence predicted. Ironmaw from the east, savage and brutal, led by Alpha Gregor, who believed strength meant crushing anything weaker. Bloodcrest from the north, tactical and precise, commanded by Alpha Helena, who studied warfare like art. Darkwater from the west, unpredictable and vicious, following Alpha Cain, who enjoyed inflicting pain. Each force alone would have been a serious threat. Combined, they were overwhelming. We are outnumbered 3 to 1, Commander Rowan said flatly. Maybe worse. I can count, Darius replied. His wolf paced restless circuits in his mind, wanting blood, wanting to tear into the enemies threatening his territory. But the Alpha King knew better. Rage was not strategy. Tell me something useful. The valley narrows at 3 choke points. Rowan traced the map. If we hold those positions, we can force them into terrain where numbers do not matter as much. And if we lose a choke point, then we fall back to the next one and hope we bleed them enough that they decide Silverfang is not worth the cost. Hope. Darius hated that word. Hope was what you relied on when planning failed. A shout went up from the southern road. The evacuation column appeared, a ragged line of carts and exhausted wolves stumbling into camp. Darius watched them arrive, saw the relief on faces when they realized they had made it, saw children collapse into their parents' arms, saw old wolves simply sit down in the dirt because their legs would not carry them another step. Then he saw Serafina at the rear of the column. She was covered in dust and sweat, her simple dress torn at the hem, hair falling loose from its tie. She moved among the arriving families, directing them toward the camps, checking for injuries, organizing food distribution. Even exhausted, she was working, fixing problems, holding things together. Their eyes met across the camp. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. 2 people who had been bound by fate and torn apart by pride, now forced back together by necessity. She turned away first. Darius felt the mate bond pulse sharp and painful. His wolf whimpered, but there was no time for that now. No time for anything except the war that was about to crash down on them like an avalanche. He returned his attention to the map and started giving orders. Yem. The first attack came at dusk. Iron Maw forces hit the eastern choke point with brutal directness. No finesse, no strategy, just wave after wave of warriors charging the fortifications, trying to overwhelm through sheer aggression. Darius fought in the front line because that was what Alpha Kings did. His claws ripped through enemy flesh. His jaws closed on throats. Blood sprayed hot across his face, and the wolf inside him sang with savage joy because this was what they were built for. Not politics or manipulation, just honest violence against enemies who wanted to destroy everything he protected. "To your left!" Rowan shouted. Darius spun and caught an Iron Maw warrior mid-leap. They crashed together, rolling across blood-slick ground. The enemy was strong, but Darius was stronger, fueled by fury and desperation. He slammed the warrior's head against stone until movement stopped. Then he was up and moving, looking for the next threat. The battle was chaos. Individual fights blurring together into one continuous roar of violence. Warriors fell on both sides. The wounded screamed. The dying went silent. The fortifications held but barely, groaning under constant assault. Darius caught a glimpse of Commander Rowan rallying defenders on the barricade. Saw young warriors fighting with terror and courage mixed together. Saw his people bleeding and dying to hold a line that might break at any moment. "Fall back," he roared. "To the second position. Now!" Warriors retreated in controlled chaos, dragging wounded with them. Iron Maw forces surged forward, thinking they had broken through, then hit the second line of defenses and discovered the retreat had been planned. Archers opened up from elevated positions. Trapped between fortifications and cliffs, the enemy advance stalled. Alpha Gregor himself appeared at the front, a massive wolf with silver-shot fur and scars covering half his face. He saw Darius and charged. They met in the center of the killing field. It was brutal and personal. 2 alphas trying to tear each other apart while their forces battled around them. Gregor was older but experienced, every move efficient and deadly. Darius was younger, but carrying the weight of everything he had lost, and everyone counting on him. They broke apart, circling, both bleeding. "You cannot win this," Gregor snarled. "Surrender now and I will make your death quick. Come take it then." They crashed together again. Darius felt ribs crack, tasted blood. His vision went red at the edges, but he kept fighting because stopping meant dying, and dying meant failing everyone who had trusted him despite everything he had done wrong. He found an opening. His jaws closed on Gregor's throat and bit down hard. The old alpha thrashed, claws tearing into Darius's sides, both of them locked together in a death grip. For a moment, it could have gone either way. Then Gregor went limp. Darius dropped the body and stood over it, panting, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. Around him, Iron Maw forces saw their alpha fall, and the fight went out of them. They retreated in disorder, leaving their dead behind. The first wave was broken. But it was only the first. Guys, Serafina worked through the night in the healing tents. Wounded warriors kept arriving in waves. Stab wounds and crush injuries and burns from oil fires. Some would survive with treatment. Others were dying slowly, beyond even the healer's skills. She moved among them with calm efficiency, prioritizing who could be saved and who needed comfort in their final moments. It was brutal work. Her hands were covered in blood. Her dress was ruined. The smell of death filled her nose until she stopped noticing it. "Luna," one of the younger healers called. "This one is critical." Serafina moved to the indicated cot and found a warrior she recognized, Finn, one of the 5 who had stayed behind to help with the evacuation. His chest was torn open, breathing labored and wet. She knelt beside him. "Hey, Finn, stay with me." His eyes found her. Did we hold? You held. Everyone got out because of you." "Good." He coughed and blood bubbled at his lips. That is good." She held his hand while he died. It took 3 minutes. 3 minutes of labored breathing and failing strength while she sat there unable to do anything except bear witness. When it was over, she closed his eyes and moved to the next patient because there was always a next patient. Hours blurred together. At some point, Darius appeared in the tent entrance. He was covered in blood and dirt, limping slightly, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. Their gazes met across the rows of wounded and dying. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. She turned back to her patient before he could. Whatever words he had were not worth the time it would take to hear them, not when warriors were bleeding out, not when the next attack could come at any moment, not when the mate bond ached in her chest like a reminder of everything that had broken between them. Darius stood there for another moment. Then he left. Serafina kept working and told herself the hollow feeling in her chest was just exhaustion. Mom, the second attack came 2 hours before dawn. Bloodcrest forces hit the northern choke point with precision and discipline. No wild charges. Careful probing attacks designed to find weaknesses in the defenses. Alpha Helena commanded from the rear, directing her warriors with tactical efficiency that turned the battle into a chess match. Darius was on the wall when the attack began. He had refused treatment for his wounds from the first battle, just let the healers wrap the worst cuts and got back to the front line. His body was failing, but his wolf would not let him stop. Could not stop. Because every moment he rested was another moment his people faced death alone. "They are targeting the supply lines," Rowan observed. "See how they probe left, then feint right. Helena is trying to cut us off from the camp. Then we stop her." Darius signaled for a countermove, sending fast warriors to flank the enemy advance. The battle was different from Iron Maw's assault. Quieter, more deliberate, but just as deadly. Bloodcrest warriors moved in coordinated units, supporting each other, pressing advantages when they found them and retreating before losses mounted too high. It was the kind of warfare that ground armies down through attrition. Hours passed. The sky lightened from black to gray. Warriors on both sides were exhausted, moving on instinct and desperation. The fortifications held but only barely, and everyone knew the Third Army had not even committed yet. Darkwater was waiting. Alpha Cain was playing a longer game, letting Iron Maw and Bloodcrest weaken Silverfang's defenses before committing his own forces. It was smart, ruthless. Exactly what Darius would have done in his position. The northern attack finally broke at dawn, not because Bloodcrest was defeated, but because Helena decided the cost was too high. She pulled back in good order, leaving minimal casualties behind, preserving her strength for later. It was frustrating because it meant they were still there, still dangerous, just waiting for another opportunity. Darius climbed down from the wall and nearly collapsed. Rowan caught him. "You need rest, Alpha King. No time. There is always time." The commander's grip was firm. "Your people need you alive more than they need you heroic. Rest now or fall later." Darius wanted to argue, but his body made the decision for him. Legs gave out. Vision swam. He barely made it to his command tent before unconsciousness took him. He woke to find Serafina sitting beside his cot. She was not looking at him. Her attention was on her hands, methodically cleaning dirt from beneath her nails with single-minded focus. Dawn light filtered through the tent fabric, turning everything soft and golden, but her expression was hard as winter. "How long?" he asked. His voice came out rough. 4 hours. She did not stop her cleaning. You passed out from blood loss and exhaustion. The healer stitched what needed stitching and forced fluids into you. Darius tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his ribs. "Do not," Seraphina said, still not looking at him. "You cracked 3 ribs and the wounds from your fight with Gregor are infected. Move too much and you will tear the stitches. I need to get back to the line. The line is holding. Rowan has command. Your warriors are resting in shifts like sensible people who understand that exhausted soldiers make fatal mistakes." The rebuke was gentle, but landed hard. Darius lay back and studied her profile. She looked thinner than he remembered, exhausted beyond measure, but also somehow stronger, forged by months of being cast aside and dismissed and still choosing to serve. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Someone needed to make sure you did not do something stupid, like stand up and pass out again. You could have sent a healer." "I could have." Her hands finally stilled. "But I needed to see for myself that you were still breathing." The words hung between them. Darius felt his chest tighten, not from pain, from something worse. The terrible hope that maybe forgiveness was possible, that maybe he had not completely destroyed the one thing that mattered. "Seraphina, do not." She finally looked at him, and her gray eyes were ancient with grief. "Do not apologize again. Do not make promises you cannot keep. Do not say things because you think I need to hear them. Then what do you want me to say?" "Nothing." She stood. "I want you to heal. I want you to lead. I want you to be the king this territory needs instead of the fool you have been. Words are cheap, Darius. Show me through action or do not bother at all." She moved toward the tent entrance, but he caught her wrist. The touch sent lightning through the mate bond. Both of them flinched, but neither pulled away. "I am trying," he said quietly. "I know it does not fix anything. I know I do not deserve another chance, but I am trying to be better." Seraphina looked down at where his hand circled her wrist. "Try harder." Then she pulled free and left, taking the warmth and the brief flicker of hope with her. Darius lay alone in the tent, listening to distant sounds of camp activity, feeling the mate bond ache like an open wound. His wolf whimpered and paced and demanded he go after her. Fix this. Make it right. But there was no making it right. There was only surviving long enough to maybe prove he could be worthy of a second chance he absolutely did not deserve. The third attack came at noon. Darkwater forces hit all 3 choke points simultaneously with coordinated savagery. Alpha Cain had been watching, learning, waiting for the perfect moment when Silverfang's defenders were exhausted and stretched thin. Now he committed everything, and the valley turned into absolute chaos. Darius fought through pain and infection, his body screaming protest with every movement, but stopping meant dying, and dying meant letting everyone down, so he pushed through and kept fighting. The western choke point collapsed first. Darkwater warriors poured through the breach like floodwater, flanking the northern position. Silverfang defenders scrambled to respond, but they were too tired, too few, pressed on too many sides. "Fall back!" Darius roared. "Everyone to the central fortification, now!" The retreat was barely controlled chaos. Warriors grabbed wounded and ran. Civilians fled from camps as enemy forces got closer. The carefully planned defensive positions were abandoned one after another as Darkwater pressed the attack with vicious efficiency. Darius found himself fighting rearguard action with a handful of warriors, buying time for others to escape. His vision blurred red. Ribs ground together with every movement. Infected wounds leaked blood and pus, but he kept moving because the alternative was unthinkable. Alpha Cain himself appeared through the chaos. He was lean and cruel, his smile wide and wrong, eyes bright with the joy of inflicting pain. He saw Darius and laughed. The mighty Alpha King brought low. "This is delicious." They clashed. Cain was fresh while Darius was dying on his feet. The fight was brutal and one-sided. Darius landed hits, but Cain shrugged them off, while every blow the Darkwater Alpha landed felt like it might be the last one. Darius went down hard. Cain stood over him, claws extended for the killing blow. "Any last words, King?" Darius spat blood. "Go to hell. You first." The blow never fell. Seraphina appeared out of nowhere, moving faster than any Omega should be able to move. She hit Cain from the side with a knife in each hand, driving both blades into gaps in his armor. The Darkwater Alpha roared and backhanded her. She flew 10 feet and hit the ground hard. Darius surged up on pure instinct, his wolf taking control. He caught Cain mid-turn, and they crashed together. It was no longer tactical, just two predators trying to kill each other while the world burned around them. Darius's jaws found Cain's throat, bit down, held on while the Darkwater Alpha thrashed and clawed, and slowly, finally, went still. Darius dropped the body and staggered to where Seraphina lay. She was trying to sit up, blood streaming from her nose, one arm cradled against her ribs. He fell to his knees beside her, hands hovering, terrified to touch her and make it worse. "You idiot," he gasped. "Why did you—" "Because you were going to die." Her voice was steady despite the blood. "And I am not ready for that yet." Their eyes met. For one moment, everything else fell away. No battle, no chaos, no months of betrayal and pain, just two people bound by fate, kneeling in dirt while the world tried to kill them. Then reality crashed back. Darkwater forces saw their alpha fall and wavered. Silverfang warriors, seeing their king still standing, found new strength. The tide of battle shifted not because of superior numbers or tactics, but because of one Omega's courage and one Alpha's refusal to stay down. The enemy retreated. Not broken, but bloodied enough to reconsider. They pulled back beyond the valley, regrouping, licking wounds, planning their next move. But for now the assault was over. Silverfang had held. But, guys... The camp that night was quiet with exhaustion and grief. They had won, but the cost was staggering. A third of their warriors dead or too wounded to fight, supplies critically low, fortifications damaged beyond quick repair, and 3 enemy armies still out there, still dangerous, just waiting for another opportunity. It was victory by the thinnest margin. Darius stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, his body held together by stitches and sheer stubbornness. Healers had tried to force him to rest, but he refused. Could not. Not while his people dealt with the aftermath of a battle they should have lost. Seraphina appeared beside him without sound. She had been treated for her injuries, her ribs wrapped tight, bruises darkening across her face. But she stood straight and steady, looking out at the same valley. "We cannot survive another attack like that," she said quietly. "I know. The Eastern Packs will not stop. They smell blood in the water, I know. Then what do we do?" Darius was silent for a long moment. Then he said the words that tasted like defeat. "We negotiate." Seraphina turned to look at him sharply. "Not surrender," he clarified. "But we need to split them. Turn the alliance against itself. Offer terms to whoever is willing to back down and focus everything on whoever refuses. That is pragmatic." Her gray eyes studied him. "When did you start thinking like a king instead of a warrior?" "When I realized I was about to lose everything that mattered." They stood side by side in the dark, not quite touching but no longer deliberately apart either. The mate bond hummed between them, tentative and damaged but present. "I need your help," Darius said finally. "Not as my mate, not because of the bond, but because you see things I miss, and you understand how to hold people together when I only know how to break things apart." Seraphina was quiet for so long he thought she might walk away. Then she nodded once. "For the kingdom, not for you, I will take what I can get." She looked at him and something in her expression softened just slightly. Maybe that is progress. They returned to camp together and started planning for a war that had to end before it destroyed everything they were trying to protect. Blanc. The negotiations were set for 3 days later under truce terms at a neutral location. Alpha Helena of Bloodcrest agreed immediately. She was a pragmatist who understood that continued fighting would weaken all the packs involved and leave them vulnerable to outside threats. Alpha Gregor was dead, so Ironmaw sent his second, a brutal wolf named Dex, who clearly wanted blood but was outvoted by his own advisors. Darkwater refused to attend. Alpha Cain was dead, but his pack was led now by his brother Victor, who was even more vicious and unstable. The message came back clear. No negotiation, no surrender. Darkwater would finish what they started or die trying. "So be it," Darius said when he heard. "We split the alliance and destroy the one who refuses reason." The negotiation site was a meadow halfway between territories, ancient neutral ground that had been used for treaty talks for generations. Darius brought a small contingent including Rowan, several elders, and Seraphina. Helena arrived with similar numbers. They met in the center. Helena was tall and sharp-featured, gray threading through her dark hair, eyes that calculated everything. She looked at Darius, then at Seraphina, then back to Darius. "I heard you set aside your fated mate for a traitor," she said. "Interesting choice. I made mistakes." Darius held her gaze. "I am correcting them." "Are you?" Helena turned her full attention to Seraphina. "And you, Luna? You stand beside a king who humiliated you publicly. Where is your pride?" "My pride is intact," Seraphina said calmly. "My focus is on protecting my people. If that means working with someone who wronged me, then that is what I do." Helena smiled slowly. "I think I like you." She addressed Darius again. "Here are my terms. Bloodcrest withdraws from the conflict. In exchange, you grant us favorable trade agreements and cease interference in our border management." "Acceptable," Darius said. "What else?" Helena glanced at Seraphina. "And you publicly restore your Luna to full status. Not because I care about your personal affairs, but because watching you cast her aside told me you were weak. Prove you are not, and I will believe you are worth peace terms." The demand landed like a slap. Darius looked at Seraphina. She met his eyes with an expression he could not read. "This is not about negotiation," he said quietly to her. "This is about you. About what you want. I will not use restoring your status as a bargaining chip unless you agree." Seraphina was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Helena. "Your terms are acceptable. But understand this. I do not need him to restore me. I have restored myself. Any recognition from the Alpha King is just making official what has already become reality." Helena laughed outright. "Oh, I definitely like you." She extended her hand to Darius. "We have an agreement." They sealed it with blood and witnessed oaths. Bloodcrest would withdraw. Ironmaw, having lost their alpha, would follow Bloodcrest's lead. That left only Darkwater and their suicidal determination to finish the war. One enemy instead of 3. Survivable odds. As they prepared to leave the meadow, Helena pulled Seraphina aside. "A word of advice, Luna. That mate of yours is trying. Most males never manage even that much. What you do with it is your choice, but do not mistake effort for worthlessness." Seraphina nodded slowly. "Thank you." They rode back to camp as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of red and gold. Darius kept glancing at Seraphina, wanting to say something, not knowing what words could possibly matter. She broke the silence first. "When this is over, we need to talk." "About what?" "About whether there is anything left to salvage." Her gray eyes were tired. "Or whether we just accept the bond is broken beyond repair and move forward separately. And if I do not accept that, then you have to prove there is something worth saving, not with words, with who you become." The words settled heavy in his chest. That night, Darius stood in his tent, staring at maps and trying to plan for a final battle against an enemy who would not stop until everyone was dead. His body ached. His wolf was restless. The mate bond throbbed like an infected wound. But beneath all of it, buried deep, was the first real spark of hope he had felt in months. Because Seraphina had not said no. She had said, "Prove it." And proving himself was something he could do, if he survived. If any of them survived the storm that was coming. The attack should have come from Darkwater. Instead, it came from inside the camp. Darius woke to steel against his throat, and the cold realization that he had miscalculated everything. The blade pressed just deep enough to draw blood, held by a hand he recognized. Commander Rowan stood over him in the darkness of the command tent, his weathered face carved from stone in regret. "I'm sorry, my king," Rowan said quietly, "but this has to end." Darius went absolutely still. His wolf surged, demanding he fight, but the blade was positioned perfectly. One wrong move and his throat would open before he could shift. Around the tent, shadows moved, other figures. At least 5 warriors, all people he trusted, all holding weapons pointed at him. His mind raced through possibilities and came up empty. This was not Darkwater. This was not external enemies. This was his own people turning against him in the dark. "What is this?" he said. His voice came out steady despite the blade. "This is pragmatism." Rowan's grip did not waver. "We cannot win this war, not against Darkwater, not with the forces we have left. The only way Silverfang survives is if we give them what they want. And what do they want? You. Dead. Your head delivered to Victor as proof that Silverfang accepts new leadership. In exchange, Darkwater withdraws and the kingdom endures. Understanding crashed through Darius like ice water. This was not a spontaneous rebellion. This was a negotiated surrender. These warriors had been talking to the enemy, making deals, planning his execution while he bled and fought and tried to hold everything together. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. "How long?" he asked. "Since the second battle." Rowan's expression was granite. "When it became clear you were leading us to annihilation, when your pride and your broken mate bond became more important than the survival of your people." "My pride." Darius felt something cold and terrible coiling in his chest. "I negotiated peace with Bloodcrest. I split the enemy alliance. I have been trying to save this kingdom." "You have been trying to prove yourself worthy of a mate you destroyed," Rowan said flatly. "Every decision filtered through guilt instead of strategy. We need a king who leads with clarity, not someone drowning in regret." The words landed like physical blows because there was truth buried in them. Ugly, brutal truth that Darius had been avoiding. His focus had been divided, his judgment clouded. He had been trying to be a better man while the war demanded he be a ruthless king, and now his own warriors were going to kill him for it. "Who else?" Darius asked. "How many are part of this?" "Enough." Rowan shifted his weight. "The elders know. Half the remaining warriors support it. Even some of your inner circle believe this is the only path forward. Does Seraphina know?" The question came out before Darius could stop it. Pathetic and desperate. His wolf howled at the thought that she might have been part of planning his death, that the mate bond he had shattered so completely would lead her to choose the kingdom over the man who had betrayed her. Rowan's expression flickered, something almost like pity. "No. The Luna knows nothing. This decision was made to protect her as much as the kingdom." "Why?" "Because she still believes in you, you damned fool." Rowan's voice cracked slightly. "She still thinks you can be saved, but the rest of us know better. We know that sometimes the king has to die so the kingdom can live." Darius closed his eyes, felt the blade against his throat, felt his wolf raging impotently, felt the weight of every mistake and every failure pressing down until he could barely breathe. This was how it ended, not in glorious battle against external enemies, but murdered by his own people because he had failed them so completely they saw his death as mercy. "Do it then," he said quietly. "Make it clean." Rowan raised the blade. The tent exploded inward. Seraphina came through the entrance like a storm, moving faster than Darius had ever seen her move. She hit Rowan from the side with her full weight, knocking him away from Darius. The blade clattered across the floor. The other warriors surged forward, but she was already moving, positioning herself between them and the Alpha King. "Stand down," she commanded. Her voice carried absolute authority. "Luna, this does not concern you," Rowan said, climbing to his feet. "The hell it does not." Seraphina's gray eyes blazed. "You were about to murder your king based on what? A secret deal with the same enemies who have been trying to destroy us? You think that makes you pragmatic? It makes us survivors. It makes you traitors." She did not back down even though she was one Omega facing 6 armed warriors. "You negotiate with Darkwater while Darius negotiated with Bloodcrest. You plan his execution while he bleeds on the front lines defending you. And you call this strategy?" The commander's jaw tightened. "With respect, Luna, you do not understand the full situation. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how betraying your Alpha King in the middle of a war is anything other than cowardice dressed up as pragmatism." Rowan glanced at the other warriors. They shifted uncomfortably, weapons still drawn but no longer quite so certain. "The war is unwinnable," he said finally. "Darkwater will not stop. They have offered terms. The king's head in exchange for withdrawal. If we refuse, they will grind us down until nothing remains." "And you believe them," Seraphina said flatly. "You believe Victor, brother of the man we killed, will honor terms and withdraw peacefully once he has what he wants. He gave his word under witness oath." "His word." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "His brother Cain gave witness oaths too, right before he broke every treaty and attacked us anyway. But sure, trust the next one. That always works." The words landed in uncomfortable silence. One of the warriors lowered his weapon. "She has a point, Commander." Rowan's expression darkened. "What alternative do you suggest, Luna?" "We are outnumbered, exhausted, running out of supplies. Unless you have a miracle hidden somewhere, we are looking at total annihilation. Serafina was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. I do have a miracle, but it requires everyone in this tent to stop being idiots long enough to listen. 20 minutes later, they gathered in the war tent. Not just the conspirators, but the elders, key warriors, anyone with decision-making authority. Torches threw harsh shadows across exhausted faces. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Darius sat at the head of the table with Rowan's blade marks still fresh on his throat. He had not spoken since Serafina stopped his execution, had not looked at the warriors who had been ready to kill him. He just sat there feeling something fundamental crack inside his chest. These were his people. He had bled for them, led them, made mistakes trying to protect them. And they had decided he was the problem that needed removing. Maybe they were right. Serafina stood at the map table, all eyes on her. She looked small and fragile in the torchlight, but her voice carried steel. Darkwater is not our only enemy, she said. They are the obvious threat, the one making noise and drawing attention. But there is another player in this game, one who has been moving pieces quietly while everyone focused on the battle. What are you talking about? Elder Matthias asked. She pulled out documents from inside her dress. Letters, financial records, things she had apparently been gathering while everyone else was focused on survival. Bloodcrest agreed to withdraw too easily, she said. Helena is a pragmatist, but she is not soft. She would not have backed down unless she had another plan. She spread the documents across the table. These show communications between Bloodcrest and several neutral pacts, offers of territory and resources, promises of protection. From what? Rowan demanded. From whoever wins this war. Serafina met his eyes. Helena is positioning herself to swoop in after Silverfang and Darkwater destroy each other. She gets the territory without the cost. Smart, ruthless. Exactly what I would do in her position. The room went silent as people absorbed the implications. So we have been fighting the wrong enemy, one of the elders said slowly. We have been fighting multiple enemies while they play us against each other. Serafina pointed to the map. But here is the thing about complicated conspiracies. They have weak points, and Helena's weak point is that she needs both sides to keep fighting. If we collapse too early, or if Darkwater withdraws, her entire strategy falls apart. How does that help us? Darius asked. His voice came out rougher than intended. Serafina finally looked at him. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation. Just two people who had been bound by fate, recognizing that survival mattered more than pride. It helps us because we are going to do something she does not expect, Serafina said. We are going to ally with Darkwater. The room erupted. Warriors shouted over each other. Elders demanded clarification. Rowan looked like she had suggested flying to the moon. The chaos built until Darius slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack wood. Explain, he said. Serafina's gray eyes never left his. Darkwater wants you dead because you killed Cain, personal vendetta. But Victor is not stupid. He knows that fighting us weakens his pack, makes them vulnerable to exactly the kind of opportunistic grab Helena is planning. If we can convince him that Bloodcrest is the real threat, that we were both being manipulated, we can turn this into a three-way standoff instead of a two-front war. And why would he believe us? Rowan said flatly. Because I will go to him personally and lay out the evidence. Serafina's voice was calm. Because I am the cast-aside Luna who has no reason to lie for a king who humiliated her. Because sometimes the most believable messenger is the one with nothing to gain from the message. Absolutely not. The words came from Darius before he could stop them. His wolf surged, possessive and terrified at the thought of her walking into an enemy camp. You are not offering yourself as bait. I'm not asking permission. She held his gaze. I'm telling you the only strategy that gives us a chance at survival. They will kill you. Maybe. She shrugged. Or maybe they will listen. Either way, it is better than watching this kingdom tear itself apart from the inside. The room fell silent. Darius stared at the woman who was supposed to be his mate, his queen, his other half, the woman he had cast aside and broken. Now she was volunteering to walk into almost certain death to save people who had turned against him. The unfairness of it made his chest tight. Why? He asked quietly. Why would you do this after everything I did to you? Serafina's expression softened slightly. Because someone has to think beyond personal grievances. Because this kingdom is bigger than you and me and our damaged bond. Because I am Luna, and protecting my people is what I do regardless of whether my king deserves it. The words cut deep but also sparked something in his chest. Not hope, something harder. Determination. If you go, I go with you, Darius said. No. Yes. He stood slowly, feeling every injury and exhaustion. You are right that a cast-aside Luna is a believable messenger, but you need the king there to make formal treaty offers. To show that Silverfang is serious, you mean you need to protect me. I mean we do this together, or not at all. Serafina studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Together, then. Rowan cleared his throat. With respect, this is insane. It is, Serafina agreed. But so was planning to murder your king based on promises from people who have been lying since this started. At least my plan does not involve betraying our own. The commander flinched. Darius looked around the room at warriors and elders who had been ready to kill him hours ago, saw doubt and shame and desperate hope mixed together on exhausted faces. Anyone who wants to leave can do so now, he said. No judgment, no punishment. But if you stay, you follow my command. No more secret deals, no more conspiracies. We survive together or we die together, but we do it honestly. No one moved. After a long moment, Rowan drew his blade and laid it on the table in front of Darius. I was wrong, my king. I let desperation cloud my judgment. If you choose to execute me for treason, I will not resist. Darius looked at the blade, felt his wolf demand blood and justice, but he also felt the weight of leadership and the knowledge that perfect vengeance was a luxury they could not afford. Keep your blade, Commander. We need every warrior we have. But if you ever put steel to my throat again, I will tear it out personally. Understood. Darius turned to Serafina. When do we leave? Dawn. She was already moving, organizing supplies, drafting messages. We approach under truce banner and hope Victor is smart enough to listen before he kills us. And if he is not, then we die. But at least we die trying. They left at first light with an escort of 5 warriors and a white truce banner that felt pathetically fragile against the weight of what they were attempting. The ride to Darkwater territory took most of the day. They moved through devastated landscape, past burned settlements and abandoned camps, evidence of a war that had already cost too much. Darius rode beside Serafina in silence, hyper-aware of her presence, of the mate bond humming quiet and damaged between them. She had saved his life. Again. Not because she forgave him, but because she was better than he deserved. The thought sat heavy in his chest. They reached the Darkwater camp at dusk. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of Silverfang's forces. Warriors moved through organized chaos, weapons being sharpened, supplies distributed, the machinery of war humming with brutal efficiency. They saw the truce banner approach and word spread fast. By the time Darius and Serafina reached the command area, they were surrounded by hostile wolves barely restrained from attacking. Victor emerged from the central tent. He looked like his brother, but harder, meaner. Where Cain had been cruel with enjoyment, Victor was cruel with purpose. His eyes tracked over Darius with open contempt, then settled on Serafina with something uglier. The fallen king and his cast-aside mate, Victor said. This should be entertaining. We come under truce to discuss terms, Serafina said clearly. She did not flinch under his gaze. Terms that benefit both our packs. There are no terms. Victor circled them slowly, predator examining prey. You killed my brother. The only acceptable outcome is your death and the dissolution of Silverfang territory. That is what Helena wants you to believe, Serafina said. Victor stopped. What did you say? She pulled out the documents and handed them over. Helena of Bloodcrest has been manipulating this entire conflict. She wants Silverfang and Darkwater to destroy each other so she can claim the territory without cost. These prove she has been negotiating with neutral packs, promising them shares of land that belongs to both of us. Victor read through the papers slowly. His expression darkened with each page. This could be forged. It could be, Serafina agreed, But why would we forge documents that make us look like fools? Why would the cast-aside Luna risk walking into your camp to share intelligence that helps our mutual enemy? Victor's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you proposing? A temporary alliance? Seraphina's voice was steady. We combine forces. March on Bloodcrest together before Helena can consolidate her position. Divide her territory between our packs and establish clear borders. After that, if you still want blood, we can settle it honorably instead of being played like idiots. The Darkwater Alpha looked at Darius. And you agree to this? Darius met his gaze. My Luna speaks with my full authority. If she says this is our best path forward, I trust her judgment. Something flickered in Victor's expression. Surprise, maybe? Or respect for the show of unity. You cast her aside publicly, he said. Now you expect me to believe you trust her completely? I made mistakes, Darius said. His voice carried across the camp. I let pride and manipulation poison my judgment. I abandoned the one person who actually deserved my loyalty. But I'm trying to be better. And part of being better is recognizing when someone sees more clearly than I do. The words settled heavy in the silence. Seraphina glanced at him, gray eyes unreadable. Victor was quiet for a long time. Then he said something unexpected. My brother was a fool. He thought strength meant inflicting pain. He died because he could not see past his own cruelty. He looked at Darius. You killed him in honest combat. That is not murder. That is warfare. If I execute you for it, I am admitting Cain was too weak to defend himself. So you will consider the alliance, Seraphina pressed. I will verify your intelligence. If it proves accurate, we talk. If you are lying, I will kill you both slowly. Victor gestured to his warriors. Escort them to guest quarters. Under guard. They are not prisoners, but they are not free either. As they were led away, Darius leaned close to Seraphina. You just gambled both our lives on incomplete intelligence. I know, she said quietly, but it was a better gamble than watching Rowan slit your throat or waiting for Darkwater to overrun us. What if you are wrong? Then we die together. She glanced at him. Would that be so terrible? The question hung between them as they were locked in a tent under heavy guard. Two people bound by fate and separated by betrayal, now gambling everything on a strategy that required trusting enemies more than allies. 2 days passed. They were kept under close watch, but not mistreated. Food was provided. Medical supplies for Darius's lingering injuries. But mostly they sat in tense silence while Victor's scouts verified the intelligence Seraphina had provided. Darius watched her during those long hours. The way she moved. The quiet competence even in captivity. The strength that had always been there, but he had been too blind to see. You were right, he said on the second evening. About everything. Seraphina was braiding her hair, hands moving through the familiar motions. I usually am. You just never bothered to listen. I am listening now. Too late for it to matter. She finished the braid and tied it off. We are partners in survival, nothing more. Is that truly what you want? She finally looked at him. What I want is irrelevant. We are here because the kingdom needed saving, and you were too busy drowning in guilt to see the bigger picture. That does not mean the bond is repaired. It means I am doing my duty. The word should have hurt, did hurt, but beneath the pain was understanding. She was protecting herself, building walls because he had proven he could not be trusted with her heart. I will spend the rest of my life proving I can be better, he said quietly. Maybe. Her gray eyes were ancient with grief. Or maybe you will just find new ways to fail. Either way, I am not holding my breath. Before he could respond, the tent flap opened. Victor stood there, several documents in hand. His expression was carved from cold fury. Your intelligence was accurate. Helena has been playing both sides against each other while positioning to claim everything. She even had the audacity to send me a message expressing sympathy for my loss and offering alliance terms that would have left Darkwater as her subordinate. So you believe us, Seraphina said. I believe Helena is a manipulative snake who needs to be dealt with before she becomes an existential threat. Victor's smile was sharp and cold. Congratulations. You have your alliance. We march on Bloodcrest at dawn. The combined army was a terrifying sight. Silverfang and Darkwater forces merged into a single massive war machine. Wolves who had been killing each other days ago now marched side by side toward a common enemy. It was uncomfortable and tense, but also brutally effective. They hit Bloodcrest territory like an avalanche. Helena had been caught completely off guard. She had expected both sides to keep bleeding each other while she positioned for the endgame. Instead, she faced a unified force that outnumbered her 2-1 and was absolutely furious at being manipulated. The battle was short and vicious. Bloodcrest warriors fought well, but they were overwhelmed. Strategic positions fell one after another. Supply lines collapsed. Within hours, Helena's carefully constructed alliance was in full retreat. Darius fought in the front lines, his wolf finally unleashed without restraint. This was clean violence. Honest warfare against an enemy who deserved it. No complicated politics, no internal betrayals, just strength against strength. He caught glimpses of Seraphina throughout the chaos. She had stayed back with the healers as planned, but even from a distance he could feel her presence through the damaged mate bond. Steady, unshakable, the foundation that held everything together while warriors like him did the bleeding. By nightfall, they had pushed deep into Bloodcrest heartland. Helena herself appeared on the battlefield, desperate and cornered. She was a skilled fighter, but she was fighting against fate now. Victor and Darius converged on her position together, two alphas who had been enemies now united in eliminating a common threat. She went down hard but took 3 warriors with her before the end. When it was over, Victor stood over her body and spat blood, manipulative to the last. He looked at Darius. "Your mate has a dangerous mind, King. Be grateful she uses it in your favor." "I am," Darius said. They divided Bloodcrest territory as agreed. Clear borders, trade terms, mutual non-aggression. It was not friendship, but it was functional peace, which was more than either pack had expected to achieve. As they prepared to return to their respective territories, Victor pulled Darius aside. "One more thing." He gestured to where Seraphina was organizing medical supplies for the journey home. "You broke that bond through pride and stupidity. If you do it again, I will kill you myself. Not because I care about your personal life, but because the world needs more Lunas like her, and fewer fools like you." "Understood," Darius said. "Make sure you do." Tut. The journey back to Silverfang territory was quieter than the march out. Warriors were exhausted but triumphant. They had survived. Against impossible odds, through betrayal and manipulation and near-total collapse, they had emerged intact, stronger even, united in ways that only shared trauma could forge. Darius rode beside Seraphina, hyper-aware that they were approaching the moment where everything would be decided. The war was over. The external threats eliminated or negotiated into peace, which meant they could no longer hide behind survival and strategy. They had to face what was broken between them. "When we get back," he started. "Do not," she interrupted. "Do not make promises or grand declarations. Just show me through action or do not bother." "What if my actions are not enough?" She was quiet for a long time. "Then I will have spent my life serving a kingdom I love with a king I respect but do not trust. That is survivable. Not ideal, but survivable. And the bond? The bond will either heal or it will not." She looked at him directly. "I cannot force myself to forgive you just because you want redemption. That is not how it works." "I know." "Good. Then we understand each other." They rode in silence the rest of the way, two people bound by fate and separated by choices that could not be unmade, heading home to a kingdom that had survived, but not without cost. They reached Silverfang as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of blood and gold. The camp erupted in celebration. Warriors who had stayed behind rushed to greet returning fighters. Families reunited. Wolves howled triumph into the growing dark. The war was over and they had won, and that was enough for tonight. Darius stood apart from the celebration, watching his people rejoice, feeling empty despite the victory. Rowan approached slowly. "My king, I owe you—" "An apology that cannot fix what you broke," Darius interrupted. He was too tired for anger. "You tried to murder me. You negotiated with enemies behind my back. You decided your judgment mattered more than loyalty." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Yes, and you were not completely wrong." Darius met his eyes. "I had been leading with my emotions instead of clarity, making decisions filtered through guilt and shame instead of strategy. You saw that weakness and tried to protect the kingdom from it. That does not excuse treason." "No, but it explains it." Darius was quiet for a moment. You will remain as commander. We need experienced leadership, and I need people willing to challenge me when I lose perspective. But if you ever raise a blade to me again for any reason short of me becoming an actual tyrant, I will end you." "Understood." Rowan hesitated. "The Luna saved you. She stopped me when I had already decided." "I know. She is the better half of your reign, my king. Remember that." "Believe me," Darius said quietly. "I remember it every single day." Rowan left, and Darius stood alone in the growing dark, watching Seraphina move through the celebrating crowd, offering comfort and healing and steady presence to people who had almost lost everything. She was magnificent, always had been. He had just been too blind to see it. Elder Matthias appeared at his elbow. "A word, Alpha King?" Darius nodded. The old wolf gestured toward the ridge overlooking camp. They walked in silence until they stood away from the noise and celebration. "You won the war," Matthias said, "but you are losing your queen." "I know. Then fix it. I am trying." Darius felt exhaustion settling deep in his bones. "I do not know what else to do." Matthias was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed the trajectory of everything. "Step down." Darius turned sharply. "What?" "You heard me. Abdicate. Name Seraphina as sole ruler of Silverfang. Remove yourself from power entirely." "That is insane, is it?" Matthias met his eyes. "You say you want to prove you have changed, that you respect her judgment, that you understand she is the better leader. Then prove it. Give her the throne. Show her and everyone else that you mean it." The words landed like hammer blows. Step down. Abdicate. Give up the only thing he had ever known, the legacy of his bloodline, the crown he had been raised to wear. Just walk away. His wolf howled in protest at the thought, but another part of him, the part that had been growing stronger since Seraphina stopped Rowan's blade, whispered that maybe this was exactly what needed to happen. Maybe the kingdom did not need him to be king. Maybe it just needed him to stop destroying the person who actually should be. "I will think about it," Darius said finally. Matthias nodded. "Do not think too long. Time is a luxury, and forgiveness is not infinite." The elder left, leaving Darius alone on the ridge, staring down at his kingdom and contemplating a choice that terrified him more than any battle. Give up power, give up control, give up everything he had been raised to be. To become what exactly? He did not know. But as he watched Seraphina move through the camp below, healing and helping and holding everything together with quiet strength, he realized that maybe finding out was the only path left that mattered. Darius did not sleep that night. He stood on the ridge overlooking Silverfang territory and watched dawn break across the valley, painting everything in shades of gold and blood. His body ached from wounds that had not fully healed. His mind raced through possibilities that all led to the same impossible conclusion. And his wolf paced restless circuits in his chest, torn between the instinct to dominate and the growing understanding that dominance had never been the answer. Elder Matthias's words echoed in his skull. Step down. Abdicate. Give her the throne. It should have been unthinkable. Alpha Kings did not surrender power. They held it until death or defeat, passing it to sons who would rule with the same iron grip. That was the legacy. That was what his father had taught him, what generations of thorns had embodied. But his father had also taught him that a king's first duty was to his kingdom, not his pride. And right now, Silverfang did not need a king drowning in guilt and making decisions filtered through desperation to prove himself worthy. It needed clarity, strength, someone who had already proven they could lead through the worst circumstances imaginable without breaking. It needed Seraphina. The realization settled in his chest like a stone, heavy but solid, undeniable. He had spent months trying to be a better king, a better mate, a better man. But maybe the most meaningful thing he could do was stop trying to be king at all. Step aside. Let the person who actually deserved power take it. Prove through action instead of words that he finally understood what mattered. His wolf howled protest. This was surrender. This was weakness. This violated every instinct bred into their bones. But another voice, quieter but stronger, whispered that real strength was knowing when to let go. That the hardest battles were not won with claws and teeth, but with choices that carved away everything you thought defined you until only truth remained. Footsteps approached from behind. Darius did not turn. He already knew who it was. The mate bond hummed quiet recognition, even damaged and faded as it was. Seraphina stopped beside him, looking out at the same valley. She was still wearing her travel clothes from yesterday. Hair braided, practical and simple. Dark circles under her eyes betraying exhaustion she refused to acknowledge. "You did not sleep either," she said. "Too much to think about." They stood in silence while the sun climbed higher. Down in the valley, the camp was waking. Warriors beginning morning routines, families preparing breakfast. The mundane business of survival continuing because it always did, war or peace, crisis or calm. "I have been thinking about what comes next," Darius said finally. "For the kingdom. For us. For everything we built and broke and somehow held together." Seraphina glanced at him. "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That I am not the leader Silverfang needs." The words hung in the morning air. She turned to face him fully, gray eyes sharp and calculating. "What are you saying?" "I am saying you were right. About everything. You saw the threats I missed. You held people together while I tore them apart. You made the hard choices while I drowned in guilt and pride." His voice was steady despite the wolf raging inside. "The kingdom survived because of you, not me. So you want to share power," Seraphina said slowly. "Make me co-ruler. That is your grand gesture?" "No." Darius met her eyes. "I want to give you sole rule. I want to abdicate completely and name you Alpha of Silverfang." The silence that followed was absolute. Seraphina stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious about anything in my life. You are an Alpha King." She gestured at the valley. "This is your birthright, your legacy. You do not just walk away from that. Why not? If it serves the kingdom better than staying, if it proves I finally understand that power is not about what I deserve, but about what my people need." Seraphina was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that cut straight to the core. "This is guilt talking. You feel bad about what you did to me and you think giving me the throne will fix it. But abdication is not penance, Darius. It is just another way of running. Is it? Or is it the only choice that actually changes anything?" He stepped closer. "I have spent months saying I am different, saying I respect your judgment, saying I understand you are the better leader. But words mean nothing. Actions are what matter. So here's my action. I step down. You rule. And I support you however you need without the complication of shared power or damaged bonds or anything else that gets in the way. And what do you get out of this? Maybe nothing. Maybe I spend the rest of my life as just another wolf in your pack. Or maybe I get the chance to rebuild from the ground up, to figure out who Darius Thorn is when he is not drowning under the weight of a crown he never earned. His wolf was howling now, tearing at his insides, but he pushed through. Either way, the kingdom wins. And that is what matters. Seraphina studied him with those ancient gray eyes that saw through every lie and defense. You realize the pack will lose their minds over this. Alphas do not abdicate, especially not male alphas in favor of their omega mates. Let them. If they challenge you, I will stand beside you as a loyal pack member and help you defend your claim. If they challenge me, I will accept whatever judgment you pass. You are asking me to take responsibility for an entire kingdom. You already have been. I am just making it official." The sun climbed higher, the valley filled with morning light, and Seraphina stood there processing an offer that should have been impossible but somehow made terrible, perfect sense. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "Take whatever time you need." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Why now? Why not after the battle with Darkwater? Why not when Rowan tried to kill you? Why wait until we are home and relatively safe?" Darius smiled, bitter and small. "Because if I did it during crisis, you would never know if I meant it or if I was just reacting to immediate threat. This way, with the war over and the kingdom stable, the choice is clear. I am not abdicating because I have to. I am abdicating because it is right." Seraphina held his gaze for another long moment. Then she walked away, leaving him alone on the ridge, with the sunrise and the howling wolf in his chest, and the terrifying peace that came from finally making a choice that felt true. Look, the announcement came 3 days later. Seraphina had spent that time consulting with elders, speaking privately with key warriors, testing whether the kingdom would accept what Darius was proposing. The response had been mixed. Some wolves saw it as weakness, others saw it as wisdom, but most saw it as unprecedented and therefore deeply uncomfortable. Wolves did not like change, especially not change that upended fundamental hierarchies about alpha dominance and omega submission. But Seraphina had never cared much about what wolves were supposed to do. She called a full assembly in the Great Hall. Every pack member who could attend crammed into the space until it overflowed. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder. Elders occupied their traditional positions. Families pressed close to hear what their Luna had to say. Darius stood at the back, deliberately apart from the throne. Not hiding, but not claiming space either. Just another wolf in the crowd, waiting to hear what came next. Seraphina stood before them all in formal dress for the first time in months, deep blue that brought out her gray eyes, hair bound up in traditional braids, the mate mark on her neck visible to everyone. She looked every inch a queen, and the hall settled into respectful silence. "Silver Fang has survived," she began. Her voice carried clear and firm. "We faced external enemies and internal betrayals. We lost warriors, we lost homes, we lost the certainty that we were untouchable, but we did not lose ourselves. We adapted, we endured. We became stronger not through individual dominance, but through collective will." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. That survival came at a cost. Seraphina's gaze swept across familiar faces. "We learned that pride can poison judgment, that manipulation can come from those we trust, that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not against enemies, but against our own assumptions about how power should work." Darius felt every eye in the hall flicker toward him and away. "Which brings us to now," Seraphina continued. "The war is over. Our borders are secure. Our alliances are functional. We have the opportunity to rebuild stronger than before. But that rebuilding requires honest assessment of who we are and what we need going forward." She paused, letting the tension build. "Alpha King Darius Thorn has made a formal petition to this pack. He has asked to abdicate his position as king and transfer sole rule to me." The hall exploded. Wolves shouted over each other, some in outrage, some in support. Elders demanded order. Warriors argued about precedent and tradition. The noise built to a roar that threatened to tear the gathering apart before it even truly started. Seraphina let it go for exactly 30 seconds. Then she released just enough dominance to cut through the chaos. Not overwhelming, not aggressive, just enough to remind everyone that she was Luna and they would show respect. The hall fell silent. "I understand this is unprecedented," she said. "An Alpha King does not abdicate, especially not in favor of an Omega mate. But unprecedented does not mean wrong. It means we have the opportunity to do something different, something that might actually serve us better than blindly following tradition." A warrior near the front spoke up. "With respect, Luna, why should we accept this? The king made mistakes, but he corrected them. He led us through the war. Why remove him now? Because leadership is not about what you deserve for past actions." Seraphina's gray eyes were steady. "It is about what serves the pack best going forward. And the reality is that I have been leading in all but name for months, organizing evacuations, negotiating alliances, holding communities together while everyone else focused on fighting. Formalizing that authority does not change what is already happening. It just makes it honest. But you are Omega," an elder said. "Not a challenge, just a statement of uncomfortable fact. Omegas do not rule packs." "Why not?" Seraphina turned her full attention to him. "Because we are weaker. I walked into enemy territory and negotiated alliance terms while most of you were planning how to surrender. Because we are too emotional? I made tactical decisions while others were drowning in guilt and rage. Or is it just because tradition says Omegas submit and that makes you comfortable?" The elder had no answer. Seraphina turned back to address the full assembly. "I am not asking you to follow me because I am Omega or Alpha or anything else. I am asking you to follow me because I have proven I can lead, that I will put this pack first even when it costs me personally, that I will make hard choices without breaking under the weight of them." She paused. "And because the person who wore this crown before me believes I will do it better than he did." Darius stepped forward from the back of the hall. Every head turned. Wolves parted to let him through until he stood before Seraphina in front of everyone. He went to one knee. The gesture sent shockwaves through the hall. Alpha Kings did not kneel. Not to anyone, not for anything. It violated every code and tradition wolves held sacred. But Darius knelt before his mate and his queen and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I have been king for 5 years. In that time I have made decisions that nearly destroyed this pack. I let pride poison my judgment. I cast aside the one person who deserved my loyalty. I led us to the edge of annihilation because I thought strength meant never showing weakness. His voice was steady. I was wrong. About everything. And the best choice I can make now is to step aside for someone who understands that real strength is not about dominance. It is about service. He looked up at Seraphina. You are the better leader. You always have been. I am asking this pack to make official what has already been true for months. That Luna Seraphina Vale is the rightful ruler of Silverfang, and I will serve her as loyally as any pack member here. The silence was absolute. Then Elder Matthias stepped forward. I support this petition. The Luna has proven her capability. It is time we honored that instead of clinging to traditions that no longer serve us. Another elder joined him. I also support it. Warriors began stepping forward, one by one. Not all of them, but enough. Wolves who had seen Seraphina lead through impossible circumstances, who had been saved by her planning, who understood that survival mattered more than pride. Commander Rowan was among them. The hall remained split. Perhaps half supported the change. The rest were uncertain or outright opposed. But it was enough to matter. Enough to show that this was not just Darius's guilt talking, but genuine recognition of what Seraphina had accomplished. She looked down at Darius still kneeling before her. Then she turned to the assembly. I accept the petition, she said. From this moment, I claim sole rule of Silverfang territory. Any wolf who challenges this claim may do so now or forever accept my authority. No one moved. Seraphina let the moment stretch. Then she reached down and pulled Darius to his feet. Not gently, not with affection, just a functional gesture between pack members. You are released from the crown, she said formally. But you are not released from service. You will answer to my command like any other wolf in this pack. Do you accept these terms? I do. Then rise, Darius Thorn. You are king no longer. He stood, felt the weight of the crown lift from his shoulders, felt centuries of legacy and pressure and expectation dissolve into air. His wolf howled one final time and then went quiet, accepting what the man had already understood. This was right. This was necessary. This was the only path that actually led forward instead of just circling old wounds. Seraphina addressed the assembly again. We have work ahead of us. Rebuilding settlements, establishing trade with new allies, strengthening defenses. I will need every wolf to contribute, including our former king. She glanced at Darius. Report to Commander Rowan for assignment. You have warrior training. Put it to use. The dismissal was absolute. No ceremony, no grand farewell. Just practical delegation that drove home the point that he was pack member now, nothing more. Darius nodded and left the hall without another word. Behind him, Seraphina began organizing the kingdom's future with the same calm efficiency she had shown through every crisis. And for the first time in months, Darius felt like maybe he could breathe. The days that followed were strange and difficult. Darius had been Alpha King for 5 years. Before that, he had been heir. His entire life had been built around authority and leadership. Now he was just another warrior taking orders and doing the work no one else wanted. Rowan assigned him to reconstruction crews. He spent his days hauling timber and stone, rebuilding homes that had been destroyed in the conflict. His hands blistered. His back ached. The work was brutal and mindless and exactly what he needed. No complicated politics, no life or death decisions, just physical labor that exhausted his body and quieted his mind. Other wolves treated him with careful distance. Not hostile, but uncertain. No one knew quite how to interact with a former king. Some showed respect out of habit. Others deliberately ignored his past status. A few made pointed comments about mighty falling. Darius took it all without complaint. He was learning what it meant to be expendable, to have no authority except what he earned through effort, to be judged not on legacy but on immediate contribution. It was humbling in ways that battle and betrayal had never been. But it was also freeing. For the first time since his father died, Darius was not carrying the weight of an entire kingdom. He could focus on the task in front of him without calculating political ramifications, could make mistakes without those mistakes threatening thousands of lives, could just exist as himself instead of as a symbol. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Serafina ruled from the palace with steady competence. She met with elders daily, organized supply distribution, handled disputes between pack members, negotiated ongoing terms with Victor and Bloodcrest survivors. The kingdom ran smoother under her leadership than it had in years. Darius watched from distance and felt pride mixed with grief. Pride that she was thriving, grief that he had wasted so much time refusing to see what was always obvious. They barely spoke. She was busy with ruling, and he was assigned to work crews that kept him far from the palace. When their paths did cross, it was brief and functional. She would give him directions or acknowledge his presence with a nod. Nothing personal, nothing that referenced what had been between them. The mate bond ached constantly now, not with the sharp pain of recent betrayal, but with the dull throb of permanent damage, like a wound that had scarred wrong and would never quite heal properly. His wolf mourned the loss. But the man understood that some things could not be fixed just by wanting them to be. Quotes. 3 weeks after the abdication, Victor arrived for a formal state visit. Darius was hauling stone for a new defensive wall when the Darkwater Alpha's entourage arrived. He paused long enough to watch the procession enter the valley, then went back to work. This was not his concern anymore. Serafina would handle it with the same capability she handled everything else. That evening, he was summoned to the palace. The order came through Rowan, delivered with neutral expression. Luna requests your presence at the state dinner. Formal dress. Do not be late. Darius almost refused. He had no place at diplomatic functions now, but orders were orders, and he had promised to serve however needed. He cleaned up as best he could, borrowed formal clothes that fit poorly, and arrived at the palace as the sun set. The great hall had been transformed. Long tables laden with food and drink, torches throwing warm light across stone walls, musicians playing traditional wolf songs. Serafina sat at the head table in deep blue formal dress, looking every inch the queen she had become. Victor sat beside her, laughing at something she said. The Darkwater Alpha looked relaxed in a way he never had during the war. Peace clearly suited him. Darius entered quietly and found a seat near the back with other pack members of no particular rank. A few wolves glanced at him with curiosity or pity. Most just ignored him. Former kings were uncomfortable reminders that power was not permanent. The dinner proceeded with speeches and toasts. Victor stood and praised the alliance. Serafina responded with careful diplomacy about mutual benefit and lasting peace. Elders made formal comments. Warriors shared battle stories that were already becoming legend. Then Victor stood again and called for silence. I have one more toast, he announced. His voice carried across the hall. To the wolf who made this peace possible. The one who saw clearly when everyone else was blind. Who walked into my camp and gambled her life on intelligence and faith. He raised his glass towards Serafina, but she shook her head. Direct your toast elsewhere, Alpha Victor. I did not do this alone. Victor followed her gaze across the hall, to where Darius sat at the back, anonymous among pack members who had once followed his every command. The Darkwater Alpha's smile was sharp. Ah, yes, the former king. He crossed the hall until he stood before Darius. Stand up. Darius rose slowly. You made a choice I have never seen an alpha make, Victor said loud enough for everyone to hear. You gave up power when you could have clung to it. You recognized someone else was better suited to lead, and you stepped aside without being forced. That takes a kind of strength most wolves will never understand. It was not strength, Darius said quietly. It was just facing reality. Call it what you want. Victor's expression was unreadable, but I respect it. He turned to address the hall. I came here expecting to negotiate with a broken kingdom led by a desperate king. Instead, I find a thriving territory led by the most capable Luna I have ever met, and a former king who had the wisdom to recognize that and act on it. He raised his glass again, to choices that defy tradition, to leaders who earn their authority, and to wolves brave enough to change. The hall echoed the toast, though many voices were hesitant and confused. Darius met Serafina's eyes across the distance. She was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation. but perhaps the first stirring of respect that was not weighted down by grief and betrayal. It was something. Not much, but something. The dinner continued late into the night. Darius stayed at the back, speaking little, just observing the kingdom he had handed over thriving under new leadership. It hurt less than he expected. The wolf had finally accepted what the man had known for weeks. This was right. This was necessary. This was the only choice that actually served something larger than his own need for redemption. As the celebration wound down and wolves began drifting away, Serafina appeared beside him without warning. "Walk with me," she said. It was not a request. They left the hall together and walked through palace gardens lit by hanging lanterns. The night was cool and clear, stars bright overhead, the valley peaceful in ways it had not been for months. "You handled that well," Serafina said finally. Victor's toast, being publicly acknowledged as the former king in front of everyone. It could have been humiliating. It was humiliating, Darius said honestly, but humiliation is survivable. She glanced at him. "You're different, quieter, less concerned with how others see you. I am learning what matters and what does not. Being respected matters less than actually deserving respect." His voice was steady. "You are a good queen, Serafina. Better than I ever was as king." They walked in silence for a while. Then she stopped and turned to face him directly. "I do not forgive you," she said. Her gray eyes were ancient and tired. "For what you did. How you abandoned me. The months of humiliation and pain. That is not something that just disappears because you made a grand gesture. I know, but I see that you are trying, that you gave up the one thing that defined you because you believed it served the kingdom better. That takes courage." "I did not think you had. It was not courage, just acceptance. Maybe they are the same thing." She was quiet for another moment. "The bond is broken, Darius. Not severed completely, but damaged beyond what I know how to repair. We will never be what we were supposed to be as fated mates. I know that too. Good." She started walking again. "Because I need you to understand that I'm not doing this for you. I am not working toward reconciliation or trying to rebuild what we lost. I am building something new, and you can either support that as a loyal pack member or you can leave. I will support it, whatever you need." Serafina nodded slowly. "Then we understand each other." They completed the circuit of the garden and returned to the palace entrance. She disappeared inside without another word, leaving Darius standing alone in the dark. The mate bond throbbed dull and constant. His wolf was quiet, accepting the reality that they might spend the rest of their lives bound to someone who would never fully trust them again. It should have been unbearable, but somehow it was not. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, Darius had clarity. He knew where he stood, knew what was possible and what was not. Knew that redemption was not about grand gestures or dramatic changes, but about steady, consistent service over time. He returned to his quarters in the lower barracks where warriors without rank lived. Small room, simple cot. Nothing that marked him as special or important, and he slept better than he had in months. The attack came 6 days later without warning. It was not Darkwater. It was not Bloodcrest remnants. It was something no one had anticipated because everyone had assumed the war was over and the threats eliminated. It was Silverfang's own people, the wolves who had opposed Serafina's rule, who saw an Omega Queen as an abomination against natural order, who believed that pack hierarchy existed for a reason and defying it was inviting disaster. They struck at dawn, coordinated and vicious. Darius woke to screams and the smell of smoke. He grabbed his blade and ran toward the commotion without thinking, instinct taking over. Outside, the barracks were burning. Warriors fought in the streets against other warriors wearing Silverfang colors. Civil war. Internal rebellion. The one threat worse than any external enemy because it tore the pack apart from inside. He found Commander Rowan rallying defenders near the main gates. The old warrior was bleeding from a dozen cuts but still standing, still giving orders, still fighting to hold the line. "How many?" Darius shouted over the chaos. "At least 40, maybe more." Rowan blocked a strike and countered hard. "They are making for the palace. They want the Luna." Understanding crashed through Darius like lightning. This was not about territory or resources. This was about removing Serafina, about restoring what the rebels saw as proper order by eliminating the queen who defied it. Where is she? Palace war room with the elders. Rowan grabbed his arm. You need to get there. Now. She has 10 guards, but if they reach her in force, she cannot hold. Darius did not wait for more. He ran. The palace was chaos. Smoke-filling corridors. Bodies of defenders and rebels mixed together. He fought through opposition with brutal efficiency, no longer thinking, just moving toward the one destination that mattered. The war room doors were barricaded from inside. He pounded once. Let me in, now. The doors cracked open just wide enough for him to slip through, then slammed shut again. Inside, Seraphina stood surrounded by 8 remaining guards. She was armed, face smudged with smoke, eyes fierce. Their gazes locked across the room and something passed between them. Recognition. Trust. The understanding that whatever was broken between them personally did not matter right now because the kingdom was burning. How bad? She asked. Bad. Darius moved to her side automatically. At least 40 rebels, coordinated assault. They're coming for you specifically. Then we hold here until reinforcements arrive. There may not be reinforcements. This is internal. Half the pack could be compromised. Seraphina's jaw tightened. Then we hold anyway. The doors shuddered under impact. The rebels had reached the war room and were trying to break through. Wood splintered, hinges groaned. It was only a matter of time. Darius looked at the 8 guards. All young, all terrified, all understanding they were about to die defending their queen. He turned to Seraphina. There is another way. No, she said immediately. She knew what he was thinking. Listen to me. Darius grabbed her shoulders. They want you dead because you represent change they cannot accept. But they also need a target, someone to focus their rage on. If I step outside and claim I was manipulating you, that this was my plan all along to hold power through you, they will come for me instead. That is suicide. It is distraction. Enough time for you to escape through the servant passages and rally actual loyal forces. His grip tightened. You are the kingdom now. Not me. You survive. That is what matters. I will not let you die for me. You already did. Darius smiled, sad and honest. When you stopped Rowan's blade, when you walked into Victor's camp, when you gave me the chance to become something better than I was. Now I am returning the favor. The doors cracked ominously. Darius? Seraphina said. Her voice broke slightly. If you do this, you do not come back. I know. He released her shoulders. But maybe that is what I was always meant to do. Be the sacrifice that lets you build something better. He turned toward the failing doors before she could argue further, pulled them open himself and stepped through, into a corridor packed with 40 rebel wolves howling for blood. Darius stepped into the corridor and 40 wolves stopped howling. For one frozen moment, they just stared at the former Alpha King standing alone before them, blade in hand, smoke curling around his shoulders like a funeral shroud. Then recognition rippled through the rebel ranks, and the shock transformed into something uglier. Rage, vindication, the satisfaction of prey walking willingly into the trap. The rebellion leader pushed forward. His name was Garrett, a traditionalist elder who had opposed Seraphina's rule from the beginning. His gray beard was matted with blood, and his eyes burned with zealot certainty. You, Garrett spat, you weak fool! You handed our kingdom to an Omega and expected us to accept it. Darius met his gaze without flinching. I handed the kingdom to someone capable of leading it. That terrifies you because it exposes how fragile your power always was. Fragile. Garrett laughed harsh and bitter. We are wolves. We follow strength, natural order, not some corrupted mate bond that made you soft. You want to talk about corruption? Darius took a step forward and the rebels tensed. I corrupted this kingdom by refusing to see truth, by letting pride and manipulation poison every decision. Seraphina did not make me weak. She revealed that I already was. Behind him, he could hear movement in the war room. Seraphina and her guards slipping away through the servant passages. He just needed to keep these wolves focused on him long enough for her to reach safety and rally actual loyal forces. He needed to make himself the only target that mattered. You blame the Luna for your failures, Darius said, voice carrying down the corridor. But the truth is simpler and uglier. You are terrified of her because she is better than you, better than me, better than every wolf in this rebellion combined. She led us through impossible circumstances while you plotted in shadows. She negotiated peace while you nursed grudges. She built while you destroyed. Lies, Garrett snarled. She manipulated you, used the mate bond to control your decisions. If that were true, I would still be king. Darius smiled cold and sharp. But I am not. I gave up power willingly because I finally understood that being Alpha King meant nothing if I was not serving my people. She did not take anything from me. I handed it to her because she earned it. The words landed like hammer blows. These wolves had built their entire rebellion on the idea that Serafina was weak, that Darius was manipulated, that natural order had been violated. Hearing the former king himself dismantle that narrative with brutal honesty shook their certainty. Garrett sensed the wavering. You are a traitor, he roared, to your bloodline, to your legacy, to everything your father built. My father built a kingdom on strength and dominance. Darius felt something shift in his chest, old certainties crumbling, old wounds finally scarring clean. I was trying to honor that legacy by being harder and stronger and more ruthless than necessary. It nearly destroyed everything. My father was wrong, I was wrong, and you are wrong. The rebel leader's face twisted with fury. Then you die as a traitor. He lunged. Darius met the attack with cold efficiency. Their blades crashed together in the narrow corridor, sparks flying. Garrett was older but carried decades of experience. Darius was younger but exhausted from weeks of physical labor and still healing from old wounds. They were evenly matched, which meant this would be brutal. The rebels closed in, forming a circle. This was not warfare anymore. This was execution dressed up as combat. They would let Garrett try to kill him first out of respect for tradition, but if he started winning, they would swarm him and tear him apart. Darius accepted that. This was always how it was going to end. He just needed to buy enough time. The fight moved down the corridor, crashing through furniture and decorations. Garrett fought with religious fervor, absolutely convinced he was righteousness made flesh. Darius fought with the calm that came from having nothing left to lose except the chance to protect someone who mattered more than his own survival. Their blades locked, faces inches apart. Garrett hissed through clenched teeth. You should have stayed king, should have put that Omega in her place, restored order. Order is not about putting anyone in their place. Darius shoved him back. It is about recognizing where people belong based on capability, not tradition. You cannot accept that because it means admitting you never deserved the respect you demanded. Garrett roared and came at him again. They crashed through a doorway into a wider chamber. The rebels followed, bloodthirsty and eager. The fight intensified. Darius took a slash across his ribs. Garrett caught a brutal strike to his sword arm. Both were bleeding, both exhausted, both running on fury and conviction. Then Darius saw his opening. It was small, a momentary overextension. He could drive his blade through Garrett's throat and end this. Win the fight. Prove through violence that he was still dominant. Every instinct screamed at him to take it. His wolf howled for blood. But something had changed in the weeks since he abdicated. Something fundamental about who he was and what he believed strength meant. And in that frozen moment with an opening before him and death circling close, Darius made a choice that defied every teaching his father had drilled into him. He dropped his blade. The clatter of steel on stone echoed through sudden silence. Garrett froze mid-strike, utterly baffled. What are you doing? Proving a point. Darius straightened slowly, empty hands at his sides. You want me dead because I represent change you cannot accept. Fine. Kill me. But understand that you will be murdering an unarmed wolf in front of 40 witnesses, that the story will spread, that every pack member will know the rebellion's first act of restored order was executing someone who chose not to fight back. That is cowardice. No. Darius met his eyes. That is me refusing to give you the violent confrontation you need to justify this rebellion. You wanted me to fight like the old king, brutal and dominant, proving strength through bloodshed. But I'm not that king anymore. I am just a wolf who understands that some battles are not worth winning. Garrett's blade trembled. You are insane. Maybe. Or maybe I finally learned that courage is not about who can inflict the most damage. It is about who can choose restraint when violence is easier. The rebel leader stood there, blade raised, utterly lost. His entire worldview required Darius to fight, to prove through combat that dominance mattered, but the former king had just removed that option by refusing to play the game. Behind Garrett, the other rebels shifted uncomfortably. This was not how executions were supposed to go. The condemned was supposed to fight or beg or at least show fear, not stand there calmly talking about philosophy while waiting to die. A voice called from down the corridor, "Stand down, now!" Everyone turned. Seraphina stood at the corridor entrance, flanked by Commander Rowan and 50 loyal warriors. She was armed and her eyes blazed with cold fury. Behind her, more wolves poured into the palace. The loyal forces she had rallied, the warriors who had chosen their queen over their outdated traditions. Garrett looked between Darius and Seraphina, calculations racing across his face. The distraction had worked. The former king had bought exactly enough time. Now the rebellion was outnumbered and surrounded with no hostage to leverage. He had lost before the real battle even began. "Put down your weapons," Seraphina commanded. "All of you. This ends now." The rebels wavered. Some dropped their blades immediately. Others clutched them tighter, desperate for any option that was not complete defeat. Garrett turned back to Darius. One last chance to restore meaning through violence. He raised his blade for the killing blow. Darius did not move, did not defend himself, just stood there with empty hands and steady eyes, accepting whatever came next. The blade never fell. Seraphina moved faster than anyone thought possible. She covered the distance in heartbeats, her own blade intercepting Garrett's mid-strike. Steel screamed against steel. She drove him back with shocking force, every move precise and brutal. This was not the gentle Omega Luna that wolves dismissed. This was a queen defending her kingdom and her people with absolute ruthlessness. Garrett tried to counter, but Seraphina was everywhere, anticipating his moves, exploiting weaknesses. Within seconds, he was on the ground, her blade at his throat, his own weapon clattering away. The corridor went absolutely silent. "You wanted to restore order," Seraphina said quietly. Her voice carried to every wolf present. "Here is order. I am Luna of Silverfang. I earned this position through capability and sacrifice. Any wolf who challenges that challenges me directly. Not through rebellion, not through assassinations in the dark. Face to face. With honor." She pressed the blade slightly deeper. Garrett froze. "But I am not my predecessor." Seraphina's gray eyes were cold. "I do not rule through fear and domination. I rule through strength tempered with mercy. So I offer you a choice. Swear loyalty to this pack and accept my authority, or leave Silverfang territory forever. You have 10 seconds to decide." Garrett stared up at her, seeing for perhaps the first time what everyone else had already recognized. This Omega was not weak. She was forged steel, unbreakable, capable of violence when necessary, but choosing restraint when possible. She was everything a true leader should be. "I swear loyalty," he gasped, "to Luna Seraphina Vale, to Silverfang Pack." The other rebels echoed the oath, voices overlapping in desperate sincerity. They had gambled everything on removing her and lost completely. Now survival meant submission. Seraphina held Garrett's gaze for another long moment. Then she removed her blade and stepped back. "You will spend the next year rebuilding the settlements you helped destroy. Every home, every structure, with your own hands. And if I ever hear of you plotting rebellion again, there will be no second chances." "Understood, Luna." She turned to address all the rebels. "The same applies to everyone here. Loyalty is not optional. It is earned through consistent action over time. Prove you mean your oaths or leave my territory." They nodded, broken and shamed, but alive. Seraphina finally turned to look at Darius. He was still standing where she had left him, blood seeping from the cut on his ribs, exhaustion carved into every line of his body. Their eyes met across the corridor and something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. He had chosen her survival over his own, had bought her time at cost of his life, had finally proven through action instead of words that he understood what mattered. "You're an idiot," she said quietly. "I know. You dropped your blade, stood there and waited to die. It seemed like the right choice at the time. It was the stupidest thing I have ever witnessed." Her voice cracked slightly. "And the bravest." Darius smiled, tired and honest. "I learned from the best." Seraphina held his gaze for another moment. Then she turned to Commander Rowan. "Secure the rebels. Make sure this palace is cleared of any other threats. And get a healer for the fool who thinks unarmed is a valid combat strategy." As warriors moved to follow her orders, Seraphina walked away without another word to Darius. But something had shifted. Some fundamental tension had released. The mate bond hummed quiet between them, damaged but no longer quite so broken. It was not healing, but maybe it was the first step toward something new. The aftermath took weeks to process. The rebellion had been larger than anyone realized. Nearly a quarter of Silverfang's warriors had been involved to some degree, either actively fighting or providing support. Rooting out the conspiracy required careful investigation and painful decisions about who could be trusted going forward. Seraphina handled it with steady competence. She did not execute the rebels, but she did not coddle them either. They were given clear choices. Swear genuine loyalty and prove it through service, or leave the territory. Most chose to stay and rebuild. A few left, unable to accept an Omega Queen regardless of her capability. The kingdom slowly stabilized. Darius spent his days working alongside the rebels, rebuilding settlements. It was hard labor made harder by the fact that he was working with wolves who had wanted him dead. But that was the point. Earning trust required being vulnerable, being present, doing the work without expectation of forgiveness or recognition. Some rebels thawed toward him. Others remained coldly hostile. He accepted both responses without complaint. Seraphina ruled from the palace and by all accounts was exceptional at it. Trade agreements were formalized, alliances strengthened. The territory prospered in ways it had not under his leadership. Elder councils reported back that she listened more than she spoke, gathered information before making decisions, and balanced strength with compassion in ways that built loyalty instead of fear. She was everything Darius had failed to be. He should have been bitter, should have regretted abdicating, should have resented watching someone else succeed where he had failed. But instead, he felt only quiet satisfaction. This was what he had wanted: the kingdom thriving, his people safe, the right person in power. His wolf had finally accepted that dominance was not the measure of worth. A month after the rebellion, Seraphina summoned him to the palace. Darius arrived at dusk, still covered in construction dust and sweat. A servant offered to let him clean up first, but he refused. If the Luna wanted to see him, she would see him as he was. No pretense. No attempt to present himself as more than just another worker in her kingdom. She met him in the garden where they had walked after Victor's state dinner. The same garden where she had told him the bond was broken beyond repair. The full circle of it was not lost on him. Seraphina looked tired but strong. She wore simple dress instead of formal regalia, hair braided, practical, and loose. She studied him for a long moment, taking in the changes a month of hard labor had carved into his frame. "You look different," she said finally. "I feel different." "Good." She gestured for him to walk with her. "The elders have been asking me to formally recognize your service during the rebellion. They want to restore some of your status, give you a position of authority as reward for protecting me." "What did you tell them?" "That status is not something I give out as reward. It is earned through consistent demonstration of capability." She glanced at him. "What do you want, Darius?" The question was deceptively simple. He thought about it carefully. Not what his wolf wanted, or what tradition expected, or what would restore his pride. What he actually wanted when all the noise stripped away. "I want to keep rebuilding," he said finally. "I want to work alongside wolves who have no reason to trust me and earn that trust through action. I want to figure out who I am when I am not carrying the weight of a crown or a legacy or expectations I never really understood." That is not a very ambitious answer. No. But it is an honest one. They walked in silence for a while. The garden was peaceful in the fading light. Somewhere in the valley below, wolves were gathering for evening meal, life continuing in its steady rhythm regardless of individual drama. "The bond is still damaged," Seraphina said quietly. "I do not know if it can be repaired. You hurt me in ways that do not just disappear because you made better choices later. I know, but I see that you are different. That you are not just performing contrition, but actually becoming someone else. Someone quieter, more thoughtful, less concerned with how others perceive you. Is that enough?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that surprised him. "I do not know yet. Ask me again in a year, or 5 years, or however long it takes for me to understand whether this change is permanent or just another phase. That is fair." They completed another circuit of the garden. The silence between them was no longer weighted with grief and betrayal. Just two people who had been bound by fate and broken by choices, trying to figure out if anything could be salvaged from the wreckage. "I am not the mate you deserved," Darius said finally. The words came out raw. "I wasted years of our bond, caused you pain I cannot undo, failed you in every way that mattered. No." Serafina stopped walking. "You were exactly the mate I needed. Not because you were good or right, but because you forced me to become stronger than I knew I could be. You broke me, but I rebuilt myself better. That is a terrible silver lining. Maybe. But it is also true." She met his eyes. "I wish things had been different. I wish you had seen me clearly from the beginning. I wish we had built a partnership instead of destroying one. But we did not. And I cannot change that any more than you can. So where does that leave us? As two people learning to coexist in the same kingdom. As former mates who might eventually become allies if you keep proving yourself. As whatever we choose to build from here instead of mourning what was lost." The mate bond hummed between them. Damaged but present. A connection that had survived everything they had thrown at it, scarred and twisted but unbroken. "I will earn your trust," Darius said. "However long it takes, whatever it requires." "Maybe you will." Serafina's smile was small and sad. "Or maybe you will fail again. Either way, I am not waiting for you. I am building my kingdom, living my life, becoming the leader my people need. If you want to be part of that, you keep showing up. Keep doing the work. Keep being the person you claim to be becoming. I can do that." "Good." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The story of what you did during the rebellion is spreading. How you dropped your blade, how you chose restraint over violence, how you bought me time at cost of your own life." Darius felt uncomfortable with the attention. It was not a grand gesture, just a choice. That is why it matters. Serafina looked back at him. Because it was not calculated or performed. It was instinctive. The real you finally showing through all the posturing and pride. She held his gaze. "That is the wolf I could maybe learn to trust again. Not the Alpha King, the broken, honest person underneath." Then she was gone, disappearing into the palace and leaving him alone in the garden with twilight settling and the weight of possibility pressing against his chest. 6 months passed. Darius worked, rebuilt settlements, helped plant crops, organized supply distribution, did whatever needed doing without complaint or expectation of recognition. Some days, Serafina summoned him for consultation on matters requiring historical knowledge of the territory. Other days, they did not interact at all. The mate bond remained damaged but stable, a constant low ache that he had learned to live with the way people live with old injuries that never quite heal. His wolf had stopped howling for dominance, had stopped demanding recognition, had accepted that they were just another member of the pack and that was enough. The kingdom prospered under Serafina's leadership. She had proven exceptional at balancing strength with compassion, at listening before deciding, at building consensus without sacrificing authority. Even wolves who had initially opposed her rule had come to respect her capability. Darius watched from distance and felt pride without jealousy. This was what leadership looked like when it was not filtered through ego and insecurity. This was what he should have been, but was not. One evening, Serafina found him at a construction site. He was hauling timber for a new community hall, hands blistered and back aching. She watched him work for a while without speaking. When he finally noticed her presence and stopped, she gestured for him to continue. "Do not let me interrupt." So he worked while she observed. It should have been uncomfortable being watched by his former mate and current queen, but instead it felt oddly peaceful, like she was seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time without all the baggage of what they had been to each other. When the sun started setting, she finally spoke. "The hall looks good. When will it be finished?" 2 more weeks if the weather holds. "You have done well with the rebuilding. The settlements you have worked on are some of the strongest we have. I had good teachers. And time to actually focus on doing things right instead of rushing to prove something." Serafina was quiet for a moment. Then she said something unexpected. "I need someone to oversee reconstruction efforts across the entire territory, coordinate between work crews, make sure resources are distributed efficiently, handle disputes about land allocation and building priorities." That sounds like a position of authority. It is. She met his eyes. It is also the work you have been doing informally for months. I am just making it official. Darius set down the timber carefully. Why now? Because you have proven you can handle responsibility without it going to your head. Because the kingdom needs experienced leadership that understands both the physical work and the political complexity. Because I trust you to do this job well. The words landed heavy. Trust. 6 months ago, that word had been impossible between them. Now she was offering it carefully, like something fragile that could break if handled wrong. I will not let you down, he said. I know. If I thought you would, I would not offer. She turned to leave, but he stopped her. Serafina. Wait. She paused. Thank you. Not just for this, for giving me the chance to become something better, for not executing me when you had every right, for seeing potential I did not know I had. I did not do it for you, she said, but her voice was softer than usual. I did it because the kingdom needs every capable wolf, and you were wasting your capability drowning in guilt and self-destruction. Still, thank you. Serafina studied him for a long moment. Then she said something that shifted everything. The bond is scarred. It will never be what it should have been. But scars are not always weakness. Sometimes they are just evidence of survival. Is that forgiveness? No, but it is acceptance. She held his gaze. I accept that you are different now, that you are trying, that you might actually become someone worthy of respect. The rest, we will see. That is enough. Good. She finally left, disappearing into the twilight. Darius stood alone at the construction site, feeling something he had not felt in a long time. Not hope exactly. Something quieter. Something sustainable. The understanding that healing was not dramatic or sudden, but slow and earned through consistency over time. He returned to work as the stars came out, hauling timber and shaping wood, building something new from the ruins of what had been destroyed. A year after the abdication, Silverfang held a festival. It was tradition after major conflicts, a celebration of survival and renewal. The entire territory gathered in the Central Valley. Food and drink flowed freely. Warriors competed in games of strength and skill. Families reconnected. The air filled with music and laughter and the simple joy of being alive. Darius attended as a regular pack member, no special seating, no formal recognition. He drank with other workers and cheered the competitions and felt more at peace than he had in years. Serafina presided from the royal platform, magnificent in formal dress that caught the firelight. She gave a speech about resilience and community that had wolves howling approval. Then she opened the dancing, and the celebration shifted into full swing. Darius stayed near the edges, content to observe. He had no desire for attention or recognition. This was not his moment. It belonged to the kingdom that had survived despite his failures. Then Serafina appeared at his elbow. Dance with me, she said. It was not a request. They moved to the center of the dancing circle. Other wolves cleared space, watching with open curiosity. The former king and the current queen, bound by damaged mate bonds, dancing together for the first time in over a year. The music was slow and traditional. They moved through familiar steps, close but not quite touching, maintaining careful distance. This will start rumors, Darius said quietly. Let it. Serafina's gray eyes were steady. People have been talking about us since the day you abdicated. Another rumor changes nothing. They danced in silence for a while. The mate bond hummed between them, still damaged but somehow less painful, like a wound that had finally scarred enough to stop bleeding. You have done well as queen, Darius said. Better than anyone expected. Better than I ever managed as king. I had a good example of what not to do. He smiled at that. Fair. The music shifted. They moved through turns and patterns that required them to come closer, hands finally touching, the contact sending sparks through the damaged bond. The bond will never fully heal, Serafina said quietly. Too much damage. Too many scars. I know. But scars can be stronger than original tissue, more resilient, built to withstand pressure. Is that hope I hear? Maybe. She met his eyes. Or maybe it is just acknowledgement that we are different people than we were, that we have both grown into something unexpected. What does that mean for us? I do not know yet. She was honest as always. But I am willing to find out, slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries and no assumptions. That is more than I deserve. Probably. Her smile was small and genuine, but maybe it is what we both need. They completed the dance as the music swelled and faded. When it ended, they stood facing each other in the center of the circle, two people who had destroyed each other and somehow built something new from the wreckage. "Thank you," Darius said, "for the dance, for the second chance, for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." "I did not do it for you," Seraphina replied, but her hand squeezed his briefly before releasing. "I did it for the kingdom. You just happened to be part of saving it." Then she was gone, returning to the royal platform and her duties as queen. Darius stood alone in the dancing circle, feeling the mate bond pulse quiet and steady. Not healed, never healed, but functional, survivable. Enough. He returned to the edges of the celebration and watched his kingdom celebrate survival under a queen who had proven herself worthy 1,000 times over. And for the first time since everything fell apart, Darius understood that redemption was not about grand gestures or dramatic changes. It was about showing up, day after day, doing the work, being consistent, letting actions speak louder than words, building trust one small choice at a time until eventually the person you claimed to be becoming was actually who you were. He had a long way to go. Years probably, maybe a lifetime. But he was no longer drowning in guilt or desperate to prove himself. He was just a wolf doing his best to serve his kingdom and earn back what he had lost. And that, finally, was enough. 5 years later, Darius stood on the same ridge overlooking Silverfang territory where he had once contemplated abdication. The valley below had been transformed, new settlements stronger than the old ones, trade routes bringing prosperity from allied packs, children playing in streets that had once run with blood. The kingdom had not just survived, it had thrived in ways he never could have achieved. Seraphina had done that, built something remarkable from the ruins he had left behind. He heard her approach before he saw her. The mate bond always gave him that awareness, damaged but persistent. She stopped beside him, looking out at the same view. They did this often now, found each other in quiet moments, talked about kingdom business or personal matters, or sometimes just stood in comfortable silence. The relationship had evolved into something neither of them had expected. Not quite mates in the traditional sense, but partners, allies. Two people who had learned each other's edges and found ways to fit together that honored their scars instead of trying to hide them. "The Eastern Territory proposal," Seraphina said. "What do you think?" "I think it is aggressive but achievable if we can secure the water rights first." Darius had learned to offer opinions without expecting them to be automatically accepted. "The survey teams you sent back good data?" "Excellent data." She smiled slightly. "I'm inclined to move forward." "Then you should." "Just like that?" "You are the queen. I trust your judgment." The words came easy now. Natural. He had spent 5 years proving he meant them. 5 years of consistent support without trying to undermine or second guess. 5 years of being the partner she needed instead of the king he thought he should be. Seraphina was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made his chest tight. "The elders have been asking about formalizing our arrangement." "What arrangement?" "Us." She gestured between them. "We work together daily. We coordinate on every major decision. We present a unified front to other packs. We are functioning as co-rulers in everything but name. We are not co-rulers. You are queen. I am just an advisor. You are more than that, and you know it." She turned to face him fully. "You have earned back authority through years of consistent service. The pack looks to you for leadership even if you do not claim a title. We might as well acknowledge reality." Darius felt his wolf stir. The old instinct to claim status and power. But 5 years had taught him to recognize that instinct and choose differently. "I do not need a title," he said carefully. "What we have works because the lines are clear. You lead, I support. Adding formal power sharing complicates that. Unless it does not." Seraphina's gray eyes were thoughtful. "Unless we have both grown enough that sharing power no longer threatens the stability we built. You want to make me king again?" "No. I want to make us co-rulers. Partners in fact and title. Because that is what we already are." The offer sat between them, heavy with possibility and danger. It was everything his wolf had once craved, everything tradition said he deserved, everything he had given up because he understood it was right. And now she was offering it back, not as something he demanded or manipulated toward, but as something earned through years of patient service and rebuilt trust. "What does the bond tell you?" he asked quietly. "That it will never fully heal." She was honest as always. "But it is functional. We are functional. We have built something real from the broken pieces. Maybe that is enough. And if I say yes, if we formalize this, then we rule together, truly together, sharing decisions and responsibility and the weight of leadership." She held his gaze. "But if you start sliding back into old patterns, if you start prioritizing your ego over the kingdom's needs, if you break my trust again, you will remove me, as you should." Exactly. Darius looked out at the valley again, at the kingdom they had both bled to protect, at the life they had built from catastrophic failure, at 5 years of slow, painful, honest work to become people worthy of the power they wielded. His wolf was quiet, content, no longer howling for dominance, but simply accepting what was offered with gratitude instead of entitlement. "Yes," he said, "let us formalize it. Let us build something new that honors everything we learned from breaking each other." Seraphina's smile was small but genuine. "Then we have work to do." They stood together on the ridge as the sun set, two people who had been destroyed and rebuilt, bound by damaged mate bonds and hard-won trust, ready to lead their kingdom into whatever came next. Not as Alpha and Omega following tradition, not as king and queen perpetuating old hierarchies, but as partners who had learned the hardest way possible that true strength came not from dominance, but from choosing to be better even when it cost everything. The valley below was peaceful. The kingdom was thriving. And for the first time since fate bound them together, Darius and Seraphina stood side by side without the weight of what they had lost overshadowing what they had built. It was not the fairy tale the mate bond had promised. It was something harder, something real, something earned through blood and tears and the willingness to change when change seemed impossible. And that made it infinitely more valuable than any fantasy could have been. Together, they walked back down to the palace to begin the work of formalizing their partnership. Two scarred souls who had learned that redemption was not about erasing the past, but about building a future worthy of the pain it took to get there. The Silverfang Kingdom had survived, not despite their failures, but because of everything those failures had taught them about what actually mattered, and that truth would guide them through whatever came next.